play with them. Ooh, ooh, we paint tiny people, then we play with them.
Hello and welcome to episode 14 of Miniatures Monthly. It is some point in April by now. My name is Chris Thurston, and as ever, I'm joined by Tom Senior.
Hello.
We're back.
We're back. A little bit delayed this time. But God, we've got so much stuff to talk about.
Oh my God, there's so much Warhammer news. So there's, we're going to launch straight into a news section thick with news because, so Adepticon Cap happened and, Games Workshop apparently took the occasion of Adepticon to just unleash.
Just dump it.
Every bit of imaginable Warhammer news. And so I think partly because of the cancellation of the AOS Open Day.
Yeah.
We ended up in a crazy kind of news snowball. And also we've both had very busy kind of miniatures months in independently roaming ways.
Loads of stuff.
Yeah. So, a packed episode, and hopefully we'll be able to return to kind of our regular last Tuesday of the month schedule this month.
Indeed.
But yeah, no promises and apologies again for the delay. We should jump straight into it. And I've tried to approximately order our news so that we can kind of deal with subjects as they come up. And actually for the first time, there's so much that's been announced that I'm cutting whole swathes of things.
We'll come back to it, probably.
Yeah. So there's some sort of 40k rumor stuff that we won't touch on, but we'll see. But I wanted to jump into 40k straight away because, there's probably less to cover. But I did want to talk about something I almost forgotten had been announced, which is the new version of Kill Team.
Oh yeah.
So, if you're unaware, Kill Team is sort of basically skirmish, AOS skirmish, but for 40k, small, units moving independently. Basically the territory that is currently catered for by Necromunda, and prior to Necromunda by Shadow War Armageddon, which came out a year ago and has been basically completely forgotten.
Obliterated by
8th edition.
Very similar things that have come out since as well.
Yeah, and so Kill Team has traditionally been a supplement for 40k that adapts the whatever existing edition rules for skirmish play. New Kill Team is, by all accounts, a completely standalone organized play competitive game.
Yeah. Nuts.
With custom dice and all those sorts of things. But using existing 40k models, so not like Shadespire in that regard.
Right. So
I'm kind of imagining a middle ground between Shadespire and traditional Warhammer.
That's really interesting, isn't it?
It's very interesting.
I like it. Any excuse to convert and paint up approximately 10 to 15 models of Warhammer 40,000, I will take.
Yeah, especially as I find myself becoming a 40k dabbler and an AOS devoted chaos person.
So yeah, we're both maining AOS, but there's always time for side projects. And, and Kill Team, stuff like Kill Team is just the sort of lure I need to buy a little box of Skitarii.
Yeah, you have a little box of Skitarii.
I do, yeah.
Find out something to do with them.
Loads of plans for them as well, like how to convert them up. I'm going to make some candles and go proper full blanche on it.
Yeah.
It's going to be good. And
always go full blanche.
Always go full blanche, especially in 40k. And it's an opportunity to explore like a darker sort of painting style than I would normally use on AOS stuff.
I find that actually that because I realized recently that like there's almost no faction in 40k I don't like.
Yeah.
Like I really love the entire fiction, the entire range. Where I haven't liked things, it's usually been a matter of digging deeper into that particular part of the fiction until I figure out something I do like. I can definitely see myself becoming a 40k dabbler rather than a kind of going all in. Well, maybe I will go all in as well. Who knows? But you know what I mean? Like,
cut to 2 years in the future and you've got like 3 Titans. These are my children now.
My toddler, my
beautiful, heavily armed toddlers.
Yeah, they are toddler sized. Did we talk about this last year at Warhammer Fest? I think we did.
I think we did. I mean, I went to Warhammer World recently. We'll get around to this, but you go to the Forge World thing and you see all of the just child sized models they've made.
It's almost like as soon as a miniature becomes the size of a toddler, it ceases to be a miniature in the same way. Like you don't see
it's really true.
You stop seeing it in scale with other miniatures and start seeing it in scale with yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
At which point it becomes small again. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does totally make sense.
Like there's a difference between a big miniature and a small person.
Yeah.
That a Titan straddles. Like
it's really true. And the Eldar Titan is even taller than the Imperium Titans. And it's just like, oh, what a weird spindly kid. Yeah, you're right. It just stops being a model.
That they are not going to be relevant to Kill Team.
I hope not. £450 for the torso on that thing.
Although, we are getting bigger knights. You see this?
Yeah, we're getting bigger and slightly smaller knights.
Yeah, so there's the Armiger Warglaives,
Yes.
which are the mini knights. But then there's the new Knight Castellant.
Yeah.
Not to be confused with the Knight Castellant, Lord Castellant.
Lord Castellan from the Stormcast Eternals, who's much smaller.
Yeah, he is much smaller, has a dog.
Does not have any
I don't
hands.
believe that but yeah, so there is, yeah, I think Codex Imperial Knights is coming, and that's going to turn knights into more of a faction with more range, which is very exciting.
You're going to buy a knight, Chris?
Not yet. And I'll tell you why. And it's because, this is maybe news I wasn't expecting to talk about, but there's rumor that, are you aware that the Adeptus Titanicus game has been kind of lost in production ether for a while?
Yeah, I remember them announcing it ages ago.
Yeah, there's a rumor that, so Adeptus Titanicus is a super old Citadel kind of thing. I think it might be even the game that the Horus Heresy was invented for. In order to have an excuse for Imperium to fight Imperium. But it's basically Battletech. It's Warhammer Battletech. It's a mech combat game where the mechs are titans and knights. And, apparently I think Forge World were going to do a new version of it, and then they saw the potential for it to actually fit into the range of boxed games that GW Proper so it's being reworked in plastic.
Oh, good.
That is maybe a rumor for another time, but that's rumored to be one of the big second half of this year things.
Ooh.
Is, mini knights. And I heard the theory, so the new big knight, the Castellant that they've announced, looks a lot like a Warlord Titan. It looks like a very small Warlord Titan.
Yeah.
And there's a rumor that it might be the same CAD kit, like the same 3D file.
Oh,
it's the Warlord Titan from Adeptus Titanicus, basically at the same scale as it would be an Adeptus Titanicus in 40k.
Oh man,
where it is a knight.
It's going to be huge.
Does that make sense?
Does kind of make sense.
Yeah. I don't know if that's true. It could just be nonsense, but I think that makes me kind of want to hold off to the second half of the year and see what happens. Cause I'd be I'm thinking about at the moment I'm working towards, there are elements of my shame pile that I can see being finished within the next 6 months. And that's very exciting. And, even sooner than that. And so a new game like Adeptus Titanicus could be one of the things that kind of, moves me in a different direction.
Yeah.
But I would probably use that as my getting my knights out of my system rather than buying a Night Warden tomorrow.
Though,
check with me tomorrow.
Yeah.
How about you? Would you be knight?
Oh, I want to paint one knight.
Yeah.
I love the knight models. They're amazing.
They're so good.
They're so good. And they're like, the perfect size. I'd say, like I'm not such a fan of the smaller ones. I'm not such a fan of the bigger ones. Like the Titans are amazing, but just out of scope for me. But the size and the bulk of of an Imperial Knight is a perfect model. It's an absolutely amazing model.
So one of the reasons I'm kind of excited about Adeptus Titanicus is everyone gets to do knights. It's not just like I've shown up with my knight army. You can't show up with your knight army.
Yeah.
So everyone does.
Yeah, everyone. I mean, imagine having a little squad of knights.
Yeah.
That'd be so good. Dreams of the future.
The other Warhammer Dreams of the Future 40k thing, and maybe this will probably move us off 40k for now, is the fact that they announced plastic sets as a battle for next year.
Mole. That's really cool, and I really hope they're new sculpts and not just like recast the metal ones.
They apparently it's a plastic range.
Oh, yeah, that's good. I really hope that they keep the organ tank artillery thing.
Yeah.
That thing is the most Warhammer 40,000 thing that exists in all the universe. So a really enthusiastic preacher and an organ in the background that plays songs for the Emperor, but also occasionally shoots missiles. It's the best thing. It's the best thing.
Yeah, like it's very interesting that they're doing this experiment of announcing it so early.
Yeah,
and then saying that they'll have a much more public production process.
That's really interesting because I've always I'm really, really curious about what lead times are on mold. I want to see the molds. I want to see how the sausage is made.
I can understand the concern that, I think this is the perfect opportunity for it because I think there's a concern that the reason you wouldn't do this normally is people will be put off buying things in the present because they'll want to wait. Right. But because the Sisters of Battle range is so out of date, like there's not a lot for people to buy now. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
there's
sure.
almost no harm in
Yeah.
waiting a year. But
Yeah.
that's, there's nothing much to say, but they haven't announced anything other than they're doing
They're
it.
just doing it, yeah.
But yeah.
Which is rad. Whenever they talk about their process, it's really fascinating. So they did, Games Workshop did a series of, interviews with, the creators around the Dark Eldar release from about 5, 6, 7 years ago, something like that.
Yeah.
Like that relaunch. Drukhari have just been relaunched again with the new codex, but in the last range, they got the designers to really go into what they were thinking about with the armor and what they were thinking about with the lore. And the lore and the visuals are very interconnected in the way that Games Workshop produces miniatures and conceptualizes miniatures. And I'd love to see their thought process for a new Sisters of Battle range. That'd be really, really cool.
Yeah, I think the new Custodes range gives it a lot of potential. Like, there's, I think one of the 40k armies I'd like to do one day is more like an Imperial Soup thing. And I appreciate that that's a very competitive thing, but I don't really think of it in those terms. I
Yeah,
just
sure.
kind of want a mixed army of the Imperium type deal with some knights and some Custodes and some Space Marines.
That's kind of what I want as well. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to do with my Scutarii planet. The idea that I had that, it's a place that's sort of surrounded by the warp a lot of the time, and just fragments of the Imperium come through. And so you've got some assassins, you've got some Sisters of Battle, you've got some, Primaris. Because why not have everything, right? All the models are good.
It's such a, the Imperium is such a kind of well-defined kind of thing that as soon as all of it is well represented with modern models, it's going to be such a rewarding thing
Fantastic,
to
isn't it? Yeah, super good.
dig into. Yeah, totally. So that's super exciting. But that is basically just the 40k stuff. If we wanted to talk about Age of Sigmar and Shadespire, there's a lot to talk about.
There is.
So I thought we could start with basically the most boring thing to mention briefly, which is, the Warhammer Legends thing that is happening, which is the return of a lot of old world metal minis in the kind of made to order system. So they're promised a lot of stuff coming back.
Yeah.
Which is potentially very interesting. And also that will come with a new centralized rules database that will replace what were the Compendium War Scrolls, which were the kind of massive bundle PDFs that were released alongside the original Age of Sigmar starter set to give people rules to use with their Bretonians or whatever.
Yeah.
So this feels like a, maybe in addition to something else we'll get on to talking about, a comprehensive sort of pulling everything, all of AOS's kind of weird baggage forwards into the present. I don't know if there's more to say about that, other than it's interesting that they've chosen this moment to kind of reaffirm support for older models.
Yeah, that is interesting. And I wouldn't know why, because Compendium is interesting in a tournament context, because a lot of different places kind of, for tournament organizers, there's always the question of, do you ban Compendium? Do you ban old Bretonians turning up because the War Scrolls are really hard to get, because the models aren't on sale, and it's, new players who have just come in for AOS can't be expected to know what the fuck the Green Knight is or something like that.
Yeah.
And this seems to bring back those ranges to an extent. I mean, I can imagine them doing a Tomb Kings run and just bringing back, some of those crazy, awesome monster sculpts.
I guess because they're managing the new War Scrolls centrally through a kind of easily accessible database.
Yeah.
It becomes reasonable.
Again, just through that infrastructure. Yeah. I've definitely, we'll talk about the tournament later, but having that centralized database of War Scrolls is something that AOS has over 40k. That is very, very good in a tournament context, because you can just look up everyone else's War Scrolls and check rules and stuff on the fly.
Totally. However, this does also link, I don't know if this was deliberate, but it does link to the conclusion of the Malign Portents campaign, which is maybe another bit of news to bounce off.
Yeah.
So Dread Solstice, which was the kind of, community-led branching narrative, came to an end. Did you see the ending, Tom?
I've not read the final bit.
Can I spoil?
Yeah.
In order to be able to talk about this, we need to be able to spoil it.
Lay
Right.
me.
So what happened was, so basically, I think I as someone who writes branching narratives for stuff in another context, with my video game narrative design stuff on my head, hat on. I know what it's like when your players pick all of the options that happen to lead to a freaky moon. And that's what happened with Dread Solstice.
Yeah.
At every given opportunity, the players picked the option that resulted in the freakiest moon, from the moon that ate secrets to the angry moon full of dinosaurs and big red men, which was shot with a time cannon and reset back into a point in time when the dinosaurs were still there. Which is the most, and then it just floated off to resolve its business.
Moon out.
Yeah. To the moon that I think just made people die faster.
Okay.
Anyway, so the armies of Order, got to the point where they were about to siege Nagashizar, where Nagash was building whatever he's building. I suspect we were never going to be able to stop Nagash, because I think what Nagash is doing is going to be essential for the next phase of AOS. But what happened is really interesting, and I can see how this could have gone a bunch of different ways. So, in response to all of the armies of both Order, Destruction, and Chaos kind of massing at his door, Nagash collapsed the desert of the Realm of Death itself.
No.
And dropped all of those armies into his oubliette, which is like it's the place where Nagash was recovering from being beaten up by Archaon all that time.
Yeah.
Like, it's his lowest underworld. Mm-hmm. It is the underworld of underworlds. But then, based on the decision that was made in the final week, all of those armies worked together, which is a thing.
Well, across all the Grand Alliances.
Yeah, across all the Grand Alliances, to enact a mass jailbreak. Not just of themselves, but of loads of the souls that were there.
Oh, man.
So what happened was, in the final moments of Malign Portents, and I think this is the thing that, you know, when they were saying that, like, the original Realmgate Wars campaign ended with the Cities of Order being founded. I think this is, which then became the boxes for Firestorm. I think this is the thing. What happened was, suddenly, in, sort of Nagash's defenses were overwhelmed just by all of these armies fighting back. And, not only were they fighting back, but they were liberating souls who'd been trapped. Some of whom were souls that had died in the Realmgate Wars and been trapped there, who returned to life.
And the world that was.
And the world that was. So loads of heroes have come back.
Oh, man.
So there's talk of, like, Karl Franz coming back.
Yeah.
And Gotrek and Felix and, like, all of these souls rushing back to life. But apparently what happened is loads of these went straight to Sigmar. So there's a description of, I think it's the Anvils of the Heldenhammer, who are the kind of Realm of Death storm host with the black armor. Basically, as many of them were coming down as were going back up. Like, they just keep coming, like, just kind of like endlessly reinforced, to the point where Nagash couldn't hold the line anymore and had to kind of just let all these souls go. So in addition to this Warhammer Legends thing, which is going to bring back old models, the story has just evolved to the point where suddenly loads of old heroes from the world that was are back and starting new lives in the mortal realms by the Age of Sigmar, which is super cool.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to incorporate that into, we didn't play a game of AOS this month, but I want to incorporate that into our story a little bit, in that, you know, we've paused our skirmish campaign, but you've basically kicked my ass and eaten me with bees in every game we've played.
Yeah.
I want to have our skirmish campaign have paused at the beginning of Malign Portents and maybe resume it or go straight to Path to Glory. But with all of my Khorne guys having been brought back to life as part of this soul release, you know, so their deaths actually did happen.
Yeah.
And then kind of move it on to the Realm of Death. I think that'd be really cool. Because like my Slaughter Priest was eaten by bees. Like, that's what happened.
Yeah.
And he's just been kind of broken out of the, and maybe use that as an excuse to bring my War Queen into it. Like, she broke them out. So that's her allegiance to Khorne, because she was summoning Tzeentch demons to fight you. Now she's leading a Khorne warband, which we'll get onto in a minute. But like, because this is the party with whom she broke out of Nagash's oubliette, I think it's a really cool idea.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to think, as you add to your Stormcast as well, how this might affect them as well.
Yeah, definitely. That's super, super interesting. I need to read that. The sweet lore.
It's good lore. There's also, a bunch of, the other, you know, the most recent Malign Portent stories, which are still going, have introduced the other new faction that is heavily involved in the stealing of souls from Nagash.
Yep.
Revealed en masse at last this month.
The Deepkin.
Idnef, Deepkin. Battle Turtle.
Battle Turtle. Flying sharks ridden by elves.
Sometimes eels.
Sometimes eels.
An octopus helping a man write.
Yeah, the best model. I love that model so
Yeah,
much. It's so good. I might just buy one of them just to...
Yeah.
It looks like the man writing is being held at knife point by an octopus.
Yeah. I think he might be one of their named characters, and it's like the two of them.
Yeah, an entirely new faction. A never before seen faction for Age of Sigmar. They came from the deep. This is we were talking last month about this. So the Teclis created them, but they went wrong because he accidentally made vampires.
Yep.
Don't accidentally make vampires. They need souls forever to stay alive. Most of their children die. They need to keep eating souls to keep their basic people alive. But a few of them are just like ancient heroes that just keep on going. So it's implied that a lot of the old sort of high elf heroes are just hiding their deepkin now and hanging out and trying to survive in the deep.
Yep. They summon, so yeah, this is the aquatic elf faction. The models are incredible.
I love them. Yep.
Genuinely, like, every old world Warhammer faction is coming back as extra as it is humanly possible to be. And
yeah.
It's, I really do like them. I do feel like they are now, with how ambitious they're getting with these sculpts, getting to the point where, like, I think they need to start considering, like, an actual range of, like, magnetic carry cases for minis and things, rather than, and selling magnets and stuff, rather than even the Crusade and Skirmish cases and stuff. Because, so the Eidolon of Mathlan.
Yeah, the Eidolons are amazing.
Which is their kind of big showcase miniature, well, in addition to the War Turtle, is a kind of elven sea god whose cape is made of a tidal wave.
Yeah.
And his base is like a little aquarium of fish and octopuses and things. And he is only connected to his base by a few sculpted drops of water. Yeah. Like, GW at the moment are really moving away from flying stems. They don't want you to have like a stick connecting your model to its base to establish that it's flying. They want you to be like, if they could make it hover, they would. But
yeah.
But I can just imagine trying to transport that. Like, I know that's the most boring thing to double down on, but I have this issue with the Lord of Change, and it's like,
yeah.
It's like, it's a single drop of water, basically connecting a magic flying water elf to his aquarium.
It's amazing that the lightness of plastic sculpts, the only reason that any of this can happen, like the fact that they've, GW is so good at producing plastic stuff that lets them do this kind of anti-gravity models, and it's getting more and more insane. Like, it's getting crazy.
It's almost a relief when something just stands on the floor.
Yeah. It's like, this thing is not good. Will not break. But plastic glue is really good as well. Like, I think there's something about plastic glue that, it fuses basically.
Yeah.
So you can do those, like, I was assembling my, Griff chargers, what are they called? Vanguard Paladors.
Yep.
And they are attached to the base by the smallest sort of corner of a hoof.
Toenail of a hoof.
Yeah. That's it. And I was like, there's no way this is ever going to happen. This kit is insane, and it is a hard kit to build, but damn, it works. Like the way plastic glue fuses means you can just sustain a huge amount of mass at the top of the model and still stand up. And the Ideneth Eidolons are a particularly good example of that. The paint job on them that the heavy metal team has done is fucking sensational.
Incredible.
As well.
Yeah, it's such a cool, different range as well. Like, such an interesting, like, I really like that they're doing this for elves, like, and also in addition, like, that they are making them consistently interesting and different.
Yeah.
And one really nice thing is, from the cavalry and the battle line troops we've seen, it seems like the standard kits have a mix of male and female models in them, which is, when we were talking about it last month with the Daughters of Cain, it's exactly what I wanted to see from them.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I'm kind of willing to give them a bit of a pass on Witch Elves because it's an older sculpt they're building new models for. I'd love to see it replaced eventually, but, like, what I said, I think last month was that the test was not that range, it was the next one.
Yeah.
And I think this is a move in the right direction.
Yeah, for sure. That's really encouraging. And plus, I like the way they're doing elves as complicating order as a Grand Alliance.
Yeah.
So, you've got Sigmar, who's obviously on one side, you've got the Dwarden, who are obviously on one side, and the elves are there to make things morally complicated now, because elves are super weird and they live in the grey areas between stuff. The only thing that really, the Ideneth Deepkin are a vampiric race of people who kind of have fallen, that they kind of had good intentions and they know what they're doing is awful. That's kind of implied by what,
What I really like about it is it taps into the sort of the kind of predatory aspect of like folklore when it comes to things like mermaids, like sirens, like the notion that like sea creatures will beckon you into the deep to drown you and steal your soul. It's like an old school folkloric thing. It's the sort of like, it has that, there are aspects of dark elves to them to some extent, but it's more like they're just a kind of predatory force. The reason they have eels that can swim through the air is they summon like this kind of like choking mist wherever they go that kind of acts like the ocean. And there's a good recent Malign Portents story where it's just people finding a village abandoned. It's more traditional high elves. It's Swifthawk agents, which is kind of a nice touch that they are like old high elves finding this village where all the people are gone, but it just reeks like the sea. Like, and it's deep inland, but this mist has settled in and it's sort of flowing over things. Ether mist, because you just add ether to something.
That's how iOS works.
Yeah, exactly. But like that, I really like that idea that like it is scary. The sea is scary. Water as the element that they are representing is not, it's not the cuddly one. It's not the healing one. It's the thing that drowns you and that kind of means you get eaten by a battle turtle. That's the other
That's how it goes sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
The Age of Sigmar universe has the best epitaphs of any universe.
Yeah, exactly.
Poor Bob. He was drowned and then eaten by a giant floating
It's
turtle.
almost like one day they will get around to updating Free Guild and Free Peoples.
Yes.
And they will finally make the extremely extra version of people. Like humans, you know what I mean? Like, I guess with Kyric Acolytes, you kind of seen that to some extent, but like, if they ever get around to updating the Empire, basically, what does that look like?
Oh yeah. Roughs.
But I almost like that they're still just like, sort of fucking Habsburg era, just German dudes.
Right.
Like in this inexplicably increasingly nonsense universe.
What happened to Bob?
Man.
Oh, he was lured by a warrior. So the Idoneth Deepkin have a hero who has a big helmet and there's a lure dangling off it. And, it draws people towards him so that he can eat their souls. That's what happened to Bob. We need bigger tombstones in this universe, people. We can't get all of this on the bloody stone.
Just war turtle. Sorry.
Yeah, it's one word. What happened to James? War turtle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we did have fun with that when that was announced. But yeah, I mean, it's super exciting. So do you, as Order man, is this tempting to you?
I think it's, I really like the models. I'm looking forward to seeing the rules. I would paint an Eidolon just to paint them, and I would paint, like, cause their heroes are really cool, especially. Yeah. I really like the hero models. Like you've got, dudes riding giant seahorses, they're really, really neat. I can't see myself like collecting them for some reason. I don't even know why I wouldn't, but I think it's just I've got too much on my plate at the moment.
Yeah, same.
I've got a Star Drake to do. I've got a load of Vanguard Hunters.
I feel like AOS rewards investment in a single faction in terms of the scope and the scale of what you can bring to bear.
Yeah,
in a way that maybe is preventing me from dabbling in the way that I'm talking about with 40k. I think maybe that's a direct consequence of the fact that the AOS universe feels so open. Like 40k feels like it is both vast, but it's also sort of, it's not evolving, right? Like it doesn't move forward except that they say it moves forward. Even though I know that Malign Portents and Dread Solstice and things was a bit of a marketing exercise, I kind of feel like I have a bit of an investment in Chaos. Like I had a sense of what Chaos was doing through that entire campaign.
Yeah.
And I liked the ending we got because it sort of benefits everybody equally. Like I can imagine all of these old Chaos champions, their soul. Actually, the Chaos champion soul would go to Chaos anyway. But you know what I mean? Like it's sort of like, I sort of feel like invested in building towards the point where I finally paint Archaon. Right? So, whereas with 40k, because there's so much interesting stories happening everywhere, I want to dabble and be a little bit part of everything, but I don't feel like investing big in, say, Adeptus Mechanicus would result in me being able to kind of like own that faction.
Yeah.
To a meaningful extent.
Yeah, I think the ally system does exist in iOS, but isn't quite built into it in the same way that it is in 40k. So New Edition 40k particularly encourages you to just make whatever army you want to make. And that isn't true of iOS really. Like, getting 200 points to spend on Idoneth Deepkin. To be honest, like, 200 points of anything isn't going to do a huge amount. It's just about letting you paint a model that you want and build it. But yeah, it feels like there's a much greater investment required to get into a new army in OS than 40k.
But also a reward for sticking with it, I guess is the flip side of it. Like, I really, I want to get to the point where you and I can sit down for like a day or even a weekend and play like a 10,000
Oh
point
yeah,
game,
yeah.
right?
It's Warhammer World. Get one of them mega tables.
Or maybe even, when we've sorted out the details, if we do our miniatures monthly meetup,
Oh, yeah.
that could be the centerpiece of that. And that's
That'd be
something
right,
I'd really
yeah.
like to discuss and figure out how to make it happen. Like, I want all of our different, I want my various chaos forces to cohere into one big army and for your various order forces to cohere. And I think that'd be super cool because we have a little bit more ownership over that story than we would have over equivalent 40k kind of thing.
Yeah, so...
But I like Idoneth. I think Pip loves sea creatures more than anything, so I'm, probably going to pick up a model for her to paint the octopus, basically.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah.
Also, like, if I ever do it, like, they feel like some of this new stuff just feels like Golden Demon bait. It's like how many times you've seen, both Mortarion and Magnus show up in Golden Demon entries, cause it's like, yep, that's just, if you want to paint something big and impressive, there you go.
Yeah. I'd love to see the octopus dude win a Golden Demon. That would be so good.
Just convert him so he's got like a paintbrush in both.
Who won this year? Was it Nagash? No, it wasn't Nagash this year.
I think it was Magnus.
It was Magnus. So next year it could be an octopus.
Could be an octopus.
Could be an octopus that wins.
So, so we're getting now into the kind of territory of what might be coming next for Age of Sigmar.
Yeah, and this is also a reason why I wouldn't dive into an Idoneth Deepkin army.
Right? So, and I want to kind of maybe lay out some ground, like some of the basics so we can start trying to piece things together.
Yep.
So, one of the other things that was so two other sort of teaser videos were released at Adepticon. One was just a big purple moon model.
Yep.
With the teaser of a new magic system for Age of Sigmar.
Yeah.
That big purple moon looks a lot like a Pokemon, but we'll ignore that.
That model is hilarious.
It'll be that, put that in one box. Okay. We also got, a teaser video for what was New Death miniatures, but was almost certainly a new Black Coach, which is a model that's been out of
for ages.
For a long time. At the same time, we also got 2 cards for new Shadespire warbands. And as I mentioned last month, I'm a huge nerd. I have counted how many remaining cards there are in Shadespire. There are only 2 more warbands coming, and in fact they're coming out next week. We can maybe talk about them in a minute.
Absolutely.
Magor's Fiends and the Fast Riders. They're done. That's Shadespire set 1 finished. These new cards had a new set symbol on them, so they're not part of Shadespire. They're part of whatever Warhammer Underworlds thing comes next. They also had new faction symbols. One of them was basically Nighthaunt Malignants, like Ghost Undead.
Yep.
Basically. Looked a little bit like Night of Shrouds. The other was a new Stormcast symbol.
Yep.
Which was a lightning bolt piercing an anvil.
Yes.
Never before seen.
Nope.
Right. That's in column over there. Okay.
Yeah.
Then, what else has happened? So, also, some German book covers leaked around the same time. Which, one is called, and the important one is called, Die Seelenkrieger, which is German for the Soul War, and shows, the Knight of Shrouds from Malign Portents fighting a Stormcast wizard, by all accounts.
A unit of them.
Stormcast with tall headdresses.
Yeah.
And staves, and at the top of each staff is the icon of an anvil being hit by lightning. So, we have, obviously a new Stormcast versus Death direction for the fiction, a new Stormcast chamber,
Yep.
Stormcast wizards,
Seems that way.
a new magic system. So I would say those two things are probably linked because I think it's really unlikely that a new magic system would arrive in the game and Stormcast not have access to it.
Does the moon mean a new magic system rather than a new unit or something? Or
I think it means a new magic system. And the reason for that is I think they're maybe not go back to like blast templates.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be surprised if spells started to have physical effects.
Right.
Because in the Nagash battle tome, they brought back, I think it's the Moon of Xerius, which is, I think what that purple moon is.
Right, yeah.
And as it's currently written in the Legions of Nagash battle tome, you cast it, and at the moment it's quite an awkward system. It's like a projectile that moves in a straight line from the caster and hits every unit in a straight line from them. And at the moment, there's not really an elegant way of resolving that in AOS.
Right.
But if there was a model that moved in a direction every turn, then that would suddenly
that's interesting.
be a thing.
The interesting thing about that model is that you could paint it up as any realm of magic type. You could do a fire one, you could do a death one.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think because Stormcast are the poster faction for the system, I think them getting wizards around the same time as a new magic system would make complete sense. And the other side to this is that, there's been rumors for a while that Age of Sigmar is going to get a new starter box. So, well, the new Shadespire cards heavily imply a new version of Shadespire probably in September, given that, that's, the second half of the year.
Yeah.
With Ghosts and new Stormcast as their core set warbands. That would be my guess.
Yeah.
However, I don't think it's a coincidence that the Shadespire 1 core set mirrors the Age of Sigmar core set, Blood Reavers versus Stormcast. There's a huge amount of talk that a new Age of Sigmar starter set may well arrive in the middle of the year, in summer, with those two factions as its contents, and that this may mean the arrival of Age of Sigmar 2nd edition.
Ooh.
That's a lot to think about all
Exciting,
at once.
isn't
But and I appreciate that what I've just done is the equivalent of that kind of mad conspiracy theory thing where all the strings are linked together on a board. But I think, and from conversations that I've had, I feel like that's what's on the cards.
Yeah.
I don't know to what extent that means a full 2nd edition of the game.
Yeah, I'm not sure it'll be a mega rules update because it feels like the rules system is more of a living system than a kind of additional one. Additional? Is that a word? I don't
It is now.
So we've just had Forgebane, which is a new starter box for Warhammer 40,000.
Yeah.
And I imagine it'll be very similar to that, where it's just
Well, that was Blight War, right?
Yeah.
So I would say this, in favor of there being a rules update, I would submit as evidence the fact that starting with, I think, Daughters of Cain, or maybe Legions of Nagash, whichever one came first, the Age of Sigmar battle tomes stopped printing the 4-page rules in the back.
Right, that's actually
Prior
quite
to that, they
persuasive,
did.
Actually. Yeah.
The new ones, everything that's released this year hasn't had the rules in the back.
Huh.
Originally they do.
Yeah, that's true.
So my guess is a rules update, but more like one of the less dramatic 40k edition changes where your war scrolls stay the same for the most part.
Yeah.
But something about the core rules changes, which could be really interesting.
That is interesting. Obviously we've thought in previous podcasts about how we would change AOS's rule set. So,
Yeah.
New magic was one of my big things. That's one of the things I would like to change most about the game, was to have a more interactive magic phase. And if that happens, I'll be very excited. I do like the AOS, rule set. I like the, I like double turns as a thing to separate the game out from, 40,000. So hopefully it keeps the things that make AOS and just kind of
So a
streamlines.
rumor I heard, now I appreciate that I'm kind of hoovering up rumors from lots of different sources. So all of this stuff is the big pinch of salt. But I really like this idea. One of the rumors I heard was that Age of Sigmar will get a command point system like 40k.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The two rules that I heard rumors of coming over from 40k were potentially a command point system, but instead of stratagems, command points would be used to trigger command abilities, which is really interesting because so there's one of the issues, and I particularly have encountered this while building up my little sort of mini Khorne force, is loads of the Khorne heroes have really interesting command abilities, but realistically, because of the way the command ability is an ability you can use in your hero phase if that model is your general. So you have all these rules that are already in the game.
Yeah.
But you only ever use one of them.
Yeah.
Because you pick one. And so you pick the best one. But actually the stuff for Khorne, for example, like I think it's the Aspiring Deathbringer can do giving a bonus attack to every Khorne unit within 6 inches of him. That stuff becomes super interesting if it's something I can pay a point to trigger. Trading off against something else. I'd totally take that. Because it's true for Kazinch as well. There's loads I mentioned it's true for Stormcast. There's loads of characters that you would never realistically pick as your general.
For sure.
But that stuff's already printed on the war scrolls. That's almost like a freebie.
Yeah.
If it just became accessible by a different means.
Yeah, interesting. I had a rumor that they're going to replace the kind of initiative system with a roll-off for the first turn. So instead of just doing a big one-drop army and then guaranteeing that you're going to choose the first turn, that will be a roll off, which is an interesting counter to just kind of Alpha Strike armies.
I think that's a really good. I would keep
idea, isn't it?
I would keep rolling off with every round. I'd keep the potential for a double turn.
Yeah.
But just add it, make it random at the start.
Agreed. I think that's just a 100% good change.
Because I don't think one drop does not mean much.
No.
And it's not a sufficient downside.
No. And I think it discourages a certain type of list as well. And there's stuff like, especially like Caradron, the type of Caradron armies you see are just like big Alpha Strike 1-drop, and then it's over by turn 2, pretty much. Yeah. And it's kind of a shame because that's such a cool range and such a cool, I actually bought the Caradron Overlord book this week, just because I wanted to double check a load of lore for the Black Library submission I was writing, and also got some vouchers for Easter. And Caradron Overlords are fucking awesome. They're really interesting, a really good, interesting take on dwarves, an inversion of a lot of dwarf stereotypes, and some fantastic artwork in that book. But the only context where you see them is just as like ridiculous that they're not on the board, then suddenly they're all on the board, and then either they win or they don't. That's kind of how they play out in the rules. So it feels like that, discouraging that type of army and having, having armies where there are airships that are on the board that stay there and kind of keep on doing stuff and actually make it to turn 5. Like that seems like a good thing.
Yeah, totally. I think I would, the other rumor I heard was, a 40k combat system change so that units that charged activate before everything else. Oh yeah. That's interesting. I think the I pick one, you pick one aspect of Age of Sigmar is, really good. I think that's the area where I'd like to see the game kind of rebalanced and repointed appropriately. Like, I want to keep a lot of the things that make AOS. For me, it makes sense in a mind's eye way that things that charge attack first, and that's your advantage for charging. I think what I would like to see is I'd like to see ranged units made quite a lot cheaper, but for them to lose the ability to shoot into or out of combat.
Right.
So it suddenly gets a lot cheaper to use them, but except for the most powerful ones or whatever, like Skyfires or something.
Yeah.
But, therefore for sort of charging to be an equal threat, like I feel like ranged, at the moment shooting is such a defining aspect of an army and of the game, and it makes so many things so good that I'd like to see it toned down, and I'd like to see fighting toned up, but I also want to see interactivity kind of increased.
Yeah.
Ideally. And I would worry that charging units fighting first might make it feel less interactive, because some armies like Khorne, for example, will just all charge in one big go and the game's basically over. Without the potential for interesting counter interactions, unless they introduce something like the heroic intervention rules from 40k where heroes can interrupt the system.
Yeah.
But that's very speculative.
Yeah. I think, shooting is balanced in the game because of the points.
Yes.
But I guess,
it's more a feel. I think it's not a question of whether it's balanced. It's whether I'd like it rebalanced by making make adjudicators cheaper, but mean that they can be tied up in combat and therefore can't shoot. That would be interesting.
Yeah. It would, though. I feel like it's so trivial to tie stuff up in AOS because everything's so fast and maneuverable.
Yeah.
And there are so many ways to get into someone's back line or bring stuff on from table edges that your shooting line will just get clogged up so easily. It'd be so trivial just to lock them up in combat because everything's so quick.
Possibly. Although maybe that's then gives liberators a thing they do, which is to stand with shields up in front of adjudicators, which is very appropriate at that point.
Yeah. But, so many armies have ways of teleporting behind, ways of getting behind,
true.
Just
true.
stopping them. So I mean, it would be such a change to the game that you'd have to sort of rebalance a lot of movement stuff. The movement stuff is what makes it AOS so exciting. That's what, separates it from Warhammer Fantasy is the ability to bring units on board edges and just do crazy stuff like teleport units across the board, do crazy stuff with your Vanguard Palador where they're moving like 66 inches as a kind of magical move. That kind of stuff is what that mad stuff that makes AOS very just crazy and exciting and a good objective based game. As soon as you start like making tar pitting a core pillar of the game design, maybe it actually runs counter to the philosophy of AOS as a movement game.
Yeah, I could totally see that. I think there's, and I think because 40k does have rules like that.
Yeah.
And I think 40k actually like the issues with deep striking in 40k are more pronounced because of that. Like, the fly keyword is super important in 40k because it allows you to retreat and shoot. And it's has hugely amplified importance because of the value of tar pitting in that game. So I don't think you're wrong necessarily. I think it's more about feel. Like, I'd like them to adjust things to the point where the rules set, like, where archers behave like archers to some extent. I appreciate that it's a mad fantasy world and we are talking about war turtles to a great extent. But like, for me, there's a difference between, it's like what you're saying about Kharadron shouldn't just be like coming down and winning or losing straight away.
Yeah.
Like, you should be getting the full flavor of the fiction from that. And like, I want a Stormcast army to be this sort of like, tightly orchestrated, strategic kind of machine where unit synergies are really important and things like that. Like, I'd love, and I don't know if it's adding more complexity, but I'd love to see the rule that like, adjudicate, maybe you can't shoot if, maybe it's becoming too complicated, but like, you can't shoot into combat unless you have another friendly unit nearby. You know what I mean? Something like that, so that like, adjudicators with bodyguards can shoot into combat. Adjudicators without bodyguards can't, right? And that'd be kind of an interesting sort of synergy thing.
It's such a different balance. Everything in 40k shoots. That's the thing. It's like, so, the thing about targeting shooting in 40k is like, which bit do you target? Which bit do you stop from shooting? That's not true of AOS, where you've got one shooting unit and basically you getting something into combat with them turns them off. So it basically just removes the unit from the game. And that, I'm not sure that's such a good thing for you.
Yeah, maybe it'd be, yes. Yeah, maybe that's fair. Like, maybe it's like, or it could even be something like -1 to hit unless you're shooting the unit you're in combat with.
Maybe some modifiers just to...
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Like, so you can shoot at the people who are fighting you.
Yeah.
But if you want to shoot the hero that's over there,
it's going to be harder.
It's going to be harder.
Yeah, you don't want to get into the situation where, like in old edition Warhammer, you'd have to randomize every single shot going into a unit. Do you remember? I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
Like you could shoot into a unit, but you had to roll to see who it hit. So it'd be a kind of high risk thing, which is actually, I really like that rule, but the actual execution of it means way more dice rolling and it's really granular.
Yeah, I think a lot of, like, I played a lot more 40k this month and like, it made me appreciate AOS more. Not that I don't like 40k, I do.
Yeah.
But like, AOS feels less like a foregone conclusion than 40k can. I think when stratagem was brought into play.
Yeah, I think double turns are an important part of that as well.
Yeah. I think it's more about feel. Like, I think there's just some aspects of AOS that a second edition or a rules update or as an opportunity to kind of smooth over. Like at the moment it's balanced around the fact that you can target heroes. It's balanced around the fact that units can shoot all the time.
Yeah.
But there are aspects of that don't feel right to me. Like, I still would like, I think I suggested this last year when I came back from Cardiff, the Blackout tournament, but like, being able to split fire to assign certain amounts of dice to different units feels like something that only the most specialist units should do. And I felt that way having just been on the receiving end of a Cunning Ruck, like a savage orc army.
That's like the worst thing though.
It is.
Cunning Ruck is just terrible.
That is the most extreme end of what the current Age of Sigmar shooting rules permit.
Yes.
And even encourage, where you end up with flying spec ops naked orcs that can target all of your heroes with exactly the right amount of dice that you can't do anything about it in turn 1 and then do it twice. Like,
it sucks. It really sucks.
It sucks. And there's like more strategic options against that. Doesn't hurt the game.
Yeah.
But I agree with you that you don't want to hurt the armies that are using it legitimately.
Yeah, this is the thing. Like, you can't design the game around the edge cases. You can't. I think it's always you get into a weird situation when you're altering core rules to stop the edge cases rather than just banning the edge cases.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's the thing. Is it's just tightening things up a bit. And I think I do think AOS is a bit of a shooting heavy game, and I would like to see it rebalanced around melee combat and interesting interactions in melee combat.
I think it depends. It varies so much between armies. Yeah, so, I mean, go to the tournament. There was a lot of shooting at the tournament. There's a lot of...
Well, in fact, let's move on to that, because that's basically us for news. And so we should move on to what we've been doing. And the big thing you did this month was AOS doubles. So
yeah, we went to, me and my friend Chimp went to, the official AOS doubles tournament at Warhammer World in Nottingham. And this is the first time I've ever been there. And it was super cool. And that place is great. So it is, like, I think it's just, in terms of atmosphere, in terms of the tables, the quality of the tables is so good. It was really well organized. And I'd say that it was such a good experience. I'd really recommend doing it as a kind of hobby goal. Because not only was the tournament excellent and really loads of fun, it kind of gave us motivation in the months leading up to the tournament to build stuff and paint stuff and just get really excited about list building. And it just improved every aspect of the hobby for the months leading up to it. So there's a kind of sense of purpose to it and a sense of building up to something. It was really good. We've got 3 wins and 2 losses in the end. So, we went in just hoping to get 1 win, basically, because we'd never played in a competitive context before. And it was interesting to see to what extent people were being competitive or not being competitive, and to what extent people were just kind of fielding hobby armies and that kind of thing. And we fought some really strange forces. That's the great thing about doubles, is that it's basically a crash tour around the Age of Sigmar universe. You're going to see so many armies. You're going to see so many different types of things. You're going to see so many war scrolls. And, that makes it just, everything's just exotic and crazy all the time. And we fought enormous Forge World dinosaurs. We fought Chaos Dwarves, which,
My first Warhammer Fantasy Battle Army. Did you know that?
What, Chaos Dwarves?
Yeah, it was Chaos Dwarves. Yeah.
You need to spend about £400 to have a Chaos Dwarves army these days, because all of them are Forge World. So yeah, I wonder how to approach this really. I don't want to do a blow by blow. I've got some notes about the games we played, which might be kind of fun to go over the stuff we faced. So the first army, we fought a couple of guys from Bristol, just down the road.
Gosh, I know that.
They were super lovely guys. A really, really nice game. And, they only started, playing Age of Sigmar Christmas.
Oh wow.
So they had one guy was fielding Khorne, and the Grand Alliances didn't apply, so you could lie across alliances, if that makes sense. So one guy was Khorne. The other guy, if I remember, was Sylvaneth.
Huh.
The classic alliance of trees,
Skulls
and
for
skulls.
the skull guys.
Skulls for the trees.
Yeah.
They made the slight mistake of splitting up the Khorne force. So, there was like half 500 points of Khorne on one side and 500 points of Khorne on the other. The thing about Khorne is that you really want the loads of overlapping radius buffs that make them really good. So if you split it, then you're sort of diluting that a lot.
Yeah. This army could be Corn on the Cob, maybe?
My kids. So, I should explain that I took Stormcast Eternals, of course. Had a unit of Fulminators, had 2 units of Judicators, and a Castellant to put the buff on the Fulminators that makes them really hard to kill.
Yep.
Pretty standard stuff. You see that in competitive play a lot. Then I took a Celestial Prime.
For fun,
because that thing, it don't do much. As I discovered in this tournament. Though it became a live running joke how bad it was. The thing about the Celestial Prime is that it does fuck all, and then it goes ham and obliterates something. And it's like, wow, was it worth taking this? Probably was for that one moment. But really good first game. I basically just charged the Fulminators up the left flank, and the Fulminators just tanked the entire flank with the Castellan and slowly killed all of the Khorne. Chimp took a death army, had a zombie dragon, had a massive unit of 40 skeletons, which was amazing. They're so good in the game, with the new, Nagash rules.
Yeah.
Because you can put down grave sites, and you put 2 in your own territory, and you can put a couple wherever you want on the board. And, if you've got some necromancers nearby and stuff, you're getting like D3 skellies back for each, grave site within 9 inches, which is a lot. So if you've got like overlapping grave sites, you're bringing back like 15 skeletons a turn or something. It's just really, really good. So you have that zombie dragon. What else? You have direwolves, which are really good as well. Just really, really old models, 2 wounds each. They're really, really fast, good objective capture. So we ended up winning our first game, and that was super nice because they were really nice because we kind of wiped out the Khorne almost immediately. And so the poor Khorne player had to sort of sit there for quite a long time as we sort of slowly ground out the victory. But he was very nice about it. So we're apparently there's going to be like a 1,000 point, tournament
this month at Big. Yeah. I might go to that.
Yeah, I might go to that as well.
Yeah, we should also go to that.
We should go to that. And apparently they were planning to do it as well. So we do some grudge matches against them. Really nice guys. So the second game we played, was, this is where some awkward things started happening. So it's interesting in catching the social side of wargaming as well. And this is kind of one of the things that interests me most beyond like rules and meta and stuff.
Yeah, because you haven't had loads of tournament experience practice.
No. And I think I was really worried about etiquette and stuff. And it was actually fine. Like, I didn't run into any problems. I think just the thing I'd recommend is just really know your army inside out so you can play to a certain speed. Some of the biggest problems we ran into, apart from rules questions, was actually just slow play. And in that final game, the people who were playing quite slowly. And it was, if you're playing to tank a force and then come back in turn 4 or 5, then you can't because people aren't playing quickly enough. And
that's an issue in all these games.
Yeah. I think it's particularly an issue with Warhammer because the game requires you to throw so many dice. Like you have to roll so many dice that just slows things down. And also there are lots of horde armies, so moving 40 skeletons takes a while. Chimp brought magnetized bases, basically, like you get like trays. Trays basically that were magnetized, so you could do that quickly. But if we were fighting people like Fire Slayers, then it was like 40 Fire Slayers coming up and being put one by one and moved one by one in 2.5 hours. You're probably not going to get a full game out. It's just simply the maths of it. It doesn't quite work. So that's an interesting one. In this particular game, though, we were playing against some Moonclan Grots, which is basically just 1 billion Moonclan Grots and one enormous idol of Mork.
Which the Forge World kind of happy statue.
It delighted massive, deadly boulders that comes up to you and smashes you in the face. And also, Iron Jaws with Godrak, who is one of the most powerful heroes in the game, and he rides this awesome dragon, and the model is amazing, and I loved seeing it on the tabletop. It was so much fun to fight him. It ended up being, it was Knife to the Heart, which is a scenario where there are 2 points on the board. If you take your opponent's point.
It's the one where you fight long ways down the table, right?
Yes. Though I think it's been changed so it's diagonal now,
right.
In this particular General's Handbook. I think it's not a good scenario, personally, for tournament play because, you either build an army to do it and have like people coming on from the back of the board and taking stuff, or you end up with 2 armies that just sit on their own point.
It was one of the 2 wins I got in Cardiff was Knife to the Heart.
Oh, yeah.
And it's because, the guy just didn't expect my screamers to disengage and go for his back line.
Right.
And I just, like, he was Moonclan Grots as well. I just flew over him.
Nice.
Like, yeah, I'm on your back line now. Sorry.
So, what happened in our game was he put all of his Moonclan Grots on his point, which is like 40 of them. And then, we put our skeletons on our point. And that's the end of the game. I mean, really, so the victory ends up coming from, the amount of points you've killed.
Yeah.
And at that point, it's just like a field battle. It's like a pitch battle. And Warhammer's never been amazing. Like, AOS has never been an amazing pitch battle game. It's always been a really strong objective game.
Right. Yeah.
Because hence what we've been talking about so far in the pod, like it's a really good movement game. It's a really interesting kind of board space control rules in terms of, things having a 3-inch bubble that you can't go in. And this when it turns into a smash up, it's just the dice off. But in this case, it was awkward because, the guy deployed his Idol of Mork and ran it at us, and it gets like a load of movement buffs and stuff, but it was crazy that it went so far, went straight into like my Fulminators in our own territory in the first turn. And we were like, can we check the War Scroll? And we realized that the War Scroll on Chimp's iPad was different to the War Scroll on the other guy's iPad.
Right.
And it turns out they just updated the War Scroll like a month ago or something. And you don't get any notifications about that. So he was just playing with an old War Scroll.
Huh.
And he couldn't have known. And it's only because like Chimp had re-downloaded everything recently just to make sure that everything was tight for the tournament. And it's extremely awkward to like hold up, a War Scroll and say, actually the rules for your thing are wrong. And it's through no fault of their own whatsoever.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't have deployed where he deployed if he couldn't get that extra movement buff. And the game would have played out slightly differently.
Did you have a TO make a decision about what applied, or?
No, he re-downloaded the War Scroll and saw that it had been updated, and we said, take your move back, because we know you wouldn't have done that necessarily. So we said, just take that move back and we can restart, but there wasn't enough time to redeploy from scratch. because we're already like half an hour into it.
Right.
And you've got an extra 2 hours. And they knew, they were cool about it. It's like, yeah, we know we can't re-rack because we won't get this game done. But it was just like it was a sore point, obviously, because it's just a bad feeling, and you got to respect that, really. But I feel like we offered them, like offering them to take I don't know what more we could have done, really.
No, I don't think so. Like, beyond getting a judge over, but even then it's unambiguous. You use the most up-to-date version of the rules.
Right, that's it, really. Like, you can't really argue with that. And they didn't argue at all. Like, it was obviously disappointing for them, but, it was an insane battle because all of the heroes went to the middle of the board and beat the shit out of each other. So it was like the Fulminators, the Zombie Dragon, the Idol of Mork and Godrak just went into the middle of the board, and, we killed 20 points more than they did.
Oh, wow.
And scraped that by the tiniest amount. My Judicator shot Godrak to death.
Good job.
Yeah, 650 points or something. Amazing. Judicators are amazing all tournaments, actually. They're very, very, very good. So the third game we played, was an amazing game. So we've gotten a couple of wins, and it was a Swiss tournament system.
Yeah.
So, basically, just match makes you people with similar levels of numbers of wins. And, you go up the tables, and we ended up at table 6 of about 90.
Nice.
So, we got to the heights of competitive action, and the armies start to get pretty brutal at that level. And, we fought a Caradron Overlord guy, that allied with a mixed order force. And this is where we started to see some crazy kind of rules number one happening, where people spot an opportunity to ally things in a certain way that make crazy stuff happen. So in this case, it was a guy who took a really weird, like Empire artillery piece that fires rockets. I don't recognize it. And he took the Lord Ordinator, which is the new low importance hero, who gets to make war machines shoot twice. He also had like another couple of buffs that he put onto that thing. So basically it was firing twice. It didn't need line of sight, so he just put it behind a wall, and it had like a 40-inch range. The old artillery war scrolls feel like they are not designed for AOS because the range is just so insane. They can hit anything, and especially if they don't need line of sight. So he just did that, got the first turn, and just destroyed the Fulminators, before we could do anything at all. It was just, there you go, they're off. But the interesting thing about like a trick list like that is once you've seen it, you see what it does, you can do stuff about it in AOS. So it was a really, really good close game. And it was the one with, I think, 4 objective markers where you're trying to keep hold of them. Yeah. And because the Caradron basically have to stand off and shoot, and they don't really want to go and capture stuff, we could just fly a zombie dragon up to get that. I brought the Prime down much, much earlier than I would have otherwise wanted to, just so I could use his meteor attack to kill the artillery crew. Yeah. So the interesting thing is that the artillery piece itself is quite tough and will take damage, but if you kill its crew, it can't shoot anymore. So I just dropped a meteor on its head, and then it died. And it couldn't, and also I'd taken the point because the Prime was there. And it ended up being super, super, super close. It was really close. Like, the Skellies moved up and just tanked loads and loads of Caradron fire. The zombie dragon was amazing. Our direwolves, like, ran up to capture a point, and they were just, like, trying to shoot us back all the time. And they ended up winning, and they were really good players. And it was just a really exciting game of, they built a really shooting heavy force. But the scenario play meant that wasn't the be all and end all of the game. Yeah. Because you've got to have maneuverability, you've got to be able to capture as well. And the friction in that game between those two things is really, really cool. It was really interesting. So we lost that one. It was close. The next one was the biggest rules dispute of the weekend. We were playing against, Chaos Dwarves, allied with some ogres on square bases.
You mean Legions of Asgore?
That's it, yeah. It took us ages to find the war scrolls. We didn't know where the hell they were in the app. And some ogres on square bases. So they were like really super, super old school armies and just really exotic, weird rule scrolls for them. Which is interesting. There was a big rules dispute, when, basically Chaos Dwarves can go into combat, and when they're saving, if they roll a 6, they deal mortal wounds back.
Right.
But if there's a -1 rend thing going on, that turns that off, right?
Yeah.
Well, wrong, according to this guy. And there's been a big argument about it, about like when a roll gets modified.
Yeah, because, well,
You know,
I mean, he's wrong.
It's exactly, it's in the rules. It's in
the rules are that anything that triggers after modifications, because that
modification.
helps you as much as it doesn't. Because
Exactly,
if you have
yeah.
+1 to hit and something that triggers on a 6, suddenly it triggers on a 5.
Exactly. Yeah. So it swings. I mean, if they'd been in cover, then they'd have gotten it. If they'd have had, a different buff on, they'd have gotten it. But it was just like, it's like, oh well, it's the word he says the roll, but then the role is modified and literally you could go back to the core rules, and on the 4-page rule sheet it says, literally explicitly lists it. Anyway, I ended up having to get a tournament organizer over.
Yeah.
And, the tournament organizer again, said, yes, that's how that works. It modifies. And then the guy argued for about 5 minutes about that's not how it should work. This seems crazy. The word's crazy. Word is crazy. And there's nothing you could do about it. It was just a weird kind of moment where they couldn't let it go.
Yeah, that stuff's tough. And I think, managing the social pressure of a moment like that, how did you guys handle it? Did you just let him argue and then get back to the game? Or?
Yeah, that's pretty much right.
Right, that's the right approach.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, everyone knows where this is going to end up. A tournament organizer has final say, and he works for Games Workshop, who made this game. So that's it. And obviously, we apologize to say, sorry, didn't mean to, cause it was the difference between the zombie dragon dying or not dying. It was quite a key moment, but also it's just the rules.
Yeah.
It's just the rules. And plus, and also I think it's better to do that because we were on game 3 and he'd been playing with that wrong rule for 2 games. And you know what I mean? So whenever you correct someone, you actually preserve the rule set for their future games.
This is one of the things that I think is sort of it's not a weakness of Warhammer, it is a competitive weakness of Warhammer. And maybe we'll talk about this when we talk about other games we played recently, but you roll so many dice and there are so many factions and so many war scrolls that you want to be able to trust that your opponent is executing their own rules appropriately.
Absolutely.
You don't have time to look up all of their stuff. There are too many pieces in the game for any one person to know everything, really.
Yep.
So, especially knowing it all the time. So, you have to be able to trust that when someone says, oh, I get +1 to hit against this, you go, okay,
yeah,
sure, just tell me what the successes are. Tell me how many saves I need to roll. And so if someone is getting that wrong, that can snowball really hard because people don't trust. You have to be able to just trust.
Yeah.
The game doesn't work otherwise. So you're right to call people on that. And I think I've encountered this in X-Wing. There's a social pressure to not want to make a fuss that you have to fight sometimes. And I have had situations where a lot of the time people don't know that they're wrong, for example. But allowing for those situations where someone can kind of ambiguously go, oh, I just thought it worked this way, and not be challenged, not call a TO over and not go through the thing.
Sure.
Opens the doors to abuse. Every TO I've spoken to in other contexts has said, if there's any doubt, bring a TO over. That's what they're for. And that unambiguous injection of perspective allows you to continue the game without bad feeling. I lost a game at the, European Championships for X-Wing that was very close. It was a difficult matchup for me anyway, but I lost it because a guy basically convinced me about an incorrect interpretation of the rules.
Oh, right.
And he did that by basically leaning over me physically.
Right.
And I felt really uncomfortable. He was a 6'2" dude and I'm a 5'5" dude. And I just felt really uncomfortable. So I was like, yeah, okay, that works. And it was about secondary weapon ranges. It's a really minor, it would be a minor thing, except he used it to blow up Emperor Palpatine.
Right. Okay.
And I felt, physically put off. And this was in a weird situation because I'd never really felt like that playing X-Wing before. But the guy was a former 40k player.
Right.
And 40k used to have a really bad reputation for exactly this. Yeah. And, I'd never encountered it before. And I made the mistake of going over to a TO after the game to say, is this right? And he was like, no, that's not right.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have been able to do that. Who was it? But at that point, it's done.
Yeah.
Right. That guy ended up getting knocked out in the second round of the top 8 or something. And I ended up feeling good about that. But that was the first time I'd really felt bad about it. And I realized, hang on, no, I should have. I felt, obviously it sucks that someone would kind of impose their will in that way, but also social pressures are such that that's quite a complicated thing to unpick.
Yeah.
If you are an operational member of society, your impulse will be to smooth the situation and make it work. And actually, You should never be put in that situation, but if you are, you should feel in your rights to go, let's get a third party to take the responsibility off me in this regard.
Yeah.
So I think you did absolutely the right thing.
I think the thing is, like, almost everyone we played with was just super happy to resolve things as simply as possible through discussion. No one wants to go get the teacher, right?
Yeah, exactly. But that's the thing.
But sometimes especially when it comes down to such a core rule that is quite clear, and we, like, Jim argued, very
like
politely to say, actually it works this way. So I don't think that really triggers. And then just the guy to dig in. And then there comes a point where it's like, well, this isn't going to resolve itself. Like,
I wouldn't see it as getting teacher. Like, see it this way, right? You're in a competition. You're in a tournament. If the resources were available, every single table would have a referee.
Yeah.
See it as there's a floating referee who needs to be summoned sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, that's what it is.
It was like, and once the guy cooled down, it was fine. Like, we got on with the rest of the game and it was nice.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people, it sounded like that intimidating guy you face, sounds like that just is what he was like. That's like what he's like as a person. But sometimes people feel disappointed and they dig into the emotion.
Yeah, that's true. There's always a reason why someone behaves negatively.
Yeah. But that passed, he did, and then he actually apologized and said, I'm really sorry I didn't.
Yeah.
And he apologized about getting emotional about it as well. So, I mean, once you get past it, like, people tend to be quite good at getting on with things.
I think a genuine positive of tabletop gaming can be that you have these genuine interactions with other human beings. Like, you have to suddenly become a little bit responsible for someone else's feeling.
Yeah.
But it goes both ways, right? Like,
yeah. And after that, like, it was a good game. We threw it because we played badly. Basically, we should have easily won it. But yeah, and it was totally fine after that. Like, we saw them in the pub afterwards, and we were just chatting. Like, the really nice thing about tournaments is that you see people you've played before, and you sort of catch each other up on where you are, and it's really, really nice, really sociable. And they're nice guys as well. But it's interesting how just these moments can happen in wargaming, and the ambiguity of, well, it wasn't ambiguous this week, but
I've seen so many different things happen, mostly through X-Wing, but like, if you can't shake it off afterwards, then there's an issue, but if you can, then...
Yeah, totally.
Like, same European Championships, I won a game I probably shouldn't have won, because me and my opponent were both running the same ship, a TIE Defender, except I was using a pilot who is depicted as flying a blue ship, and I was using the red model, and my opponent was running a ship who's traditionally flying a red model with a blue model. So I had a blue guy flying red, and he had a red guy flying blue. And one turn of the game, he made a colossal game-losing error because he got our models mixed up.
Oh, no.
And he knew which model he had brought.
Yeah,
and I knew which model I had brought.
Yeah.
And the entire game hinged on remembering which model was yours. Which is the most basic thing in wargaming, right? Oh, I thought that was my guy is a really dumb mistake to make. But I've never seen someone like collapse in on themselves with oh my God, like he kind of wanted to be able to take it back.
Yeah.
But there was no taking it back. Like, you've made a huge mistake. And like, the entire game collapsed for him from that point onwards. It was just like, it was also like bad luck because the position he was forced into because of that was like a catastrophic, like, it meant basically that instead of doing a flip turn that would allow him to get a kill shot on one of my important ships, he crashed into one of my other ships and couldn't shoot, and then got blown up from behind. It was just a disaster. And it won me the game. And I felt like I should constantly apologize. Like, I felt this pressure to be like, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
But like, neither of us, like, there was literally no blame to hand around because we'd both done the same thing. We'd both decided to pick a different model for aesthetic reasons over the standard one depicted on the card art. We'd both done the same thing in reverse.
Yeah.
And so as a consequence, he looked at his card and got his models mixed up, and that was it. And that was, but afterwards, like, and I could see like the rising tide of salt within him. Like, but it was self-directed anger. And it was like really hard to watch someone else just be like, oh God, like, I've traveled to the European Championships. I've just done this. And the kind of empathy of like, oh God, I feel so bad for you, but also I really want to win. Like, all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, like, afterwards, he was like, good game. But he obviously didn't mean it, but it was like, he could move on from it, and we could kind of move away from it. And that was kind of the appropriate thing, right? Rather than...
Yeah, disappointment is part of the game. Things are going to go wrong. and I don't begrudge people acting disappointed or being annoyed about stuff, when it's not like confrontational. But when it becomes confrontational, that's an interesting point. Someone has to back down, right?
Yeah. I think learning to be a good loser is a really good.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
It's been my journey over the last year playing Warhammer against you, Tom.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And these are only just moments that I fixated on. I think these moments are always going to happen in these tournaments where there's hundreds of people and the rules are very complicated. And that was not like, it didn't spoil anything at all, and it wasn't a negative thing that carried through to the rest of the experience. Everyone was basically lovely for the whole thing. So I mean, I've fixated on these points because they're interesting rather than because they're representative of the entire experience. It was absolutely brilliant, and the painting standard was exceptional. I was really happy. The Warhammer World boards and the terrain are outstanding. They're really beautifully painted up, and all of our opponents had fielded beautifully painted armies. Really, really great stuff. And I was really surprised because there are big 40k games happening around, and I don't mean to dump on 40k all the time, but because I like 40k.
I like it as well.
Yeah, but there was one of their 8-foot tables, and it was obviously like a 5,000 point battle. There were titans there, and only about like 20% of both armies were painted. Just loads of grey plastic, and like you go into Warhammer World playing all these beautiful tables, and the armies aren't painted, and I'm just like, part of me just went, judging you so hard right now. But yeah, it's great. Go to Warhammer World if you can. It's awesome.
A lot of our community are very soon.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, they're doing a meetup, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
The staff are really good as well. It was super well organised. Really, really enjoyed it. Our last game was against Fire Slayers and Lizardmen. The Lizardmen army was crazy. They had like the enormous dinosaur unit that Forge World sells.
I think isn't that just the Lizardmen Hip Hop Collective?
Enormous dinosaur unit. And it was the biggest model in AOS. It's got to be. It's enormous. It was beautifully painted up, and it failed to kill Judicators. Like it was so dicey, and it kind of got a charge off and stuff, and Judicators tanked it for 2 turns. I was like, wow.
Oh damn.
Yeah, good job, Judicators. And that was one with Fire Slayers, and they popped up and charged, but we kind of ran out of time as we were coming back. And actually, one lesson: not only just know your own war scrolls, but know the scenarios inside out. Because we made an error that meant that we got a minor victory rather than a major victory that we should have had. Because when you take a point in this scenario, you get double points for taking it off the opponent. So once we'd tanked the initial charge from the giant dinosaur and all the Fire Slayers who basically come up from underground and then attack you, we basically just tanked that and struck back, and in turn 3 we just exploded outwards with all of our fast moving forces and just seized everything on the board. And we should have been taking double points for each one of those. So instead of getting a minor victory, we should have had a major. But obviously once you've reported it, that's the result that goes through in the end. So yeah, know your war scrolls, know your scenarios inside out, and know the rules. Know the core rules of the game. I'd recommend. And it speeds everything up. I think the speed thing is the one thing that I hadn't thought about properly before going to a tournament.
Yeah.
Especially for Warhammer. And I've deliberately taken a very low model count army where I know the rules for those models inside out 100%. So I knew that I wouldn't be making mistakes or accidentally cheating or doing anything wrong. So yeah, I think that's what you have to do if you're going into a tournament. Get to that level of expertise with your own with your own army.
That sounds like a great experience though.
It was really good. And it's quite pricey to do it. Not because of the ticket prices necessarily, but also just travelling up and Airbnbs and stuff like that. It is expensive, but I feel like the net positives in terms of the run up to the tournament and how motivating it was from a hobby perspective, in addition to the tournament itself, is something I'll do once a year, I think, is go up and either do doubles or do AOS singles or something like that. And now I've done that once, I would totally go to big and play in any tournament. So like it's totally fine now. I know I can navigate any social things that happen. I know the rules well enough to play competitively. So I feel like, that's over the hump now. I can just do it whenever I like.
Rad.
Yeah. Really nice.
Great.
Yeah, so that was a big section on that.
No.
But it was quite a big hobby moment, I think.
Before we move on to painting, I wanted to talk briefly about, I've played a couple of games because I've started going, because I work for myself. I can occasionally carve out a little bit of time. So Thursdays are our local games workshops kind of game days. So I managed to take my armies down I've sort of started keeping demon army in my crusade case so that I can just sort of like go and play 40k or AOS whenever I want.
Yeah, rad.
To about 1,000 points. So that means that actually this month I've had a little bit more experience with both game systems than I normally do. I'm not going to do blow by blow. Needless to say, I lose every game I play. My takeaways from this month, and maybe this will be a regular feature of things I've learned. 1, Morathi. Okay?
Yeah.
She's relatively new to Age of Sigmar.
Yeah.
Hit Morathi. Because, do you know how Morathi works?
So she can freak out, right, and go into
She can freak out and turn
form.
into a big snake woman, but that's not the main thing.
She limits damage to a certain amount
Yes.
per turn, so you've got to get that damage in early.
We had a really funny game where we used the open war cards to kind of determine objectives and stuff. Right?
Yeah.
We happened to have a game where we were fighting over a treasure chest in the middle of the map. One objective. Unit grabs it, and then they have it until they die. Whoever holds it at the end of the game wins. Super simple. However, Morathi, who it was a really interesting back and forth. Siege demons versus flying angry elves. Very interesting back and forth. The Changeling tied up an entire unit of Doomfire Warlocks and a Blood Cauldron by himself in the corner of the board.
Yeah.
Really interesting. However, then turn 3 of 5. No, sorry, with 3 rounds to go, Morathi grabs the treasure chest, turns into a snake. She's undamaged. The game is over.
Right, you can't damage her.
Mathematically, she cannot be killed at that point. This is super edge case, because it's like, if there is only one objective on the board, then the game is over.
Yep.
Moral of that story? Kill Morathi.
Kill Morathi.
Yeah.
Let's kill Morathi. At least start doing damage early on, I suppose. Could shoot her straight away.
Yeah, because she, any damage she takes in mini Morathi form does carry it over.
Yeah.
But that was a really fun game, and actually, Daughters of Cain is a super fun army to play against.
Oh, cool.
Because they're so flimsy.
Right.
Until they're not, and then they're fucking terrifying.
Yeah.
Like, and it was a really interesting matchup, because I'm so used to the Stormcast matchup, that like all of my mortal wounds and shooting is actually doing loads of work. But then they get close and they're suddenly terrifying. And they obviously have a 6-up ignore and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, what else did I play? So I also played a game of 40k, Tzeentch Demons versus Nurgle Demons that I wanted to bring up because it highlighted two things. So we were playing 1,000-point game, both with battalion detachments.
So this was 40k?
Yeah, 40k.
Okay.
It's hard to tell because
So did nothing die then with all the immortal saves? For
no,
demons?
a lot of things died.
Oh, okay, cool.
So I think I was playing against a friend, but a friend who, I was playing against Jim, who runs Big. So,
Oh yeah, cool.
and he's a very good player. And I think he approached it with the mindset of like, his army's built to win, whereas my army is built to be physically present and then not be. And so I would say that like, had I known that, I would have brought my Lord of Change.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I get very nervous about transporting my Lord of Change, so I just had regular demons. He had a Great Unclean One and a 30 model block of Plague Bearers in 1,000 points. With everything else is just filler.
Yeah.
Like those two things are incredibly hard to shift. And we were playing in open play, but using stratagems and battalions and things.
Yeah.
Which is only important because in matched play 40k, you can't use the same stratagem twice in a given phase.
Okay.
Whereas we were playing it open enough to allow multiple stratagem use, but matched play enough to be limited to detachments and those kinds of things.
Okay.
And what that meant is that he was able to put both his Great and Clean One and 30 Plague Bearers in the warp and deep strike them. Which takes away basically their only weakness, which is that they're slow.
Okay.
So they were both in my face at the beginning of the game. Two amazing things happened in this game. I lost real badly.
I'm not surprised.
But like,
That's brutal.
two amazing things happened. One was the fact that, I didn't realize this. That the Changeling is incredible in 40k.
Oh, right.
Like, really different. So, he doesn't get any kind of like deploy in your territory, pretend to be in your army stuff at all. What he does is he confers a 5-up invulnerable save. A 5-up, mortal wound ignore, feel no pain type thing on any unit within 9 inches of him, which is great. Really good because you get a 4-up invulnerable save followed by a 5-up.
That's really good.
Complete ignore.
Yeah.
So that was really good and I actually like almost fought the Great and Clean One to a standstill until it started regenning. But the other thing he does is, so in AOS, when the Changeling fights in combat, he takes your weapon profile. So he remains the Changeling, but he takes your, if he fights your Fulminators, he can take your...
Gets Galmer out of you.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's good.
In in 40k, he doesn't just take your weapon profile, he takes your stat line as well.
What?
Yeah. So he gets your strength and toughness,
Huh.
but only in the combat phase.
Right, okay.
So what happened to the changeling was I realized, hang on, I should charge this great and clean one.
Yeah.
So he charges the great and clean one, gains the toughness 8 and all the rest of it, almost kills the great and clean one, but just doesn't. But this particular great and clean one was armed with the flail, which is technically a shooting attack.
Oh, no.
And a pistol. It's technically a pistol.
Yeah.
So he was able to hit the changeling in the shooting phase, which is when the changeling can't mimic the toughness, and just completely obliterate him. But the best thing that happened, and the most me thing that could have possibly happened, is this. Great and Clean One plops down out of the fucking warp sphincter right in front of my army.
Yeah.
Fails a charge.
Yeah.
Takes damage from Overwatch in failing the charge.
Of course, yeah.
So I have this turn where my entire army is pointed at this Great and Clean One. So I use one of the Tzeentch stratagems to allow me to reroll all failed Psyker tests for the following round. Just because I'm just going to pour mortal wounds into this thing.
Yeah.
Right? My general was Herald on disc. You've seen him plenty of times. Mm-hmm. So, time to go. I'm going to cast one of the big mortal wound heavy psychic powers, many of them available to Tzeentch. I pick my power. I roll a double 1.
Oh no.
But
Reroll.
I can reroll all failed rolls. I reroll them into a double 1.
Oh, that's the most cool thing.
Yeah. No, wait, hang on. So I'm like, hang on, no. I'm going to spend another command point to reroll one of them because I get +2 to this roll.
Right.
So when casting Smite, if I reroll it into a 3, then it's a successful Smite. That's fine. I reroll it into a 1.
Oh my god.
It's 5 1s in a row.
Is it Perils of the Warp as well?
It was very perilous.
Oh my god, no.
He killed himself.
Oh my god, he blew up. Why do your wizards keep blowing up?
I don't know.
In every game system. It doesn't matter.
It was incredible. It was like, I didn't just fail 1 Perils of the Warp. I failed 5.
Oh my god. That's awful. That's awful. That's almost as awful as a deep striking Great Unclean One. It's a giant monstrous turd coming in from space.
Yeah, we were trying to figure out like what each Chaos Demon's like warp exit looked like. Nurgle's obviously just an anus that opens and plops the Great and Clean One. Tzeentch is probably like a freaky eye or something, and Slanesh is unspeakable.
X-rated. Oh, that's hideous.
It was given that our very first game of Age of 40k was the one where you just marched Nurgles very slowly at me while Armin blew himself up.
Yeah.
It was like,
this has been some pretty remarkable.
like, it is becoming something I'm very proud of my ability to keep doing, but people had like gathered by that point in the game to watch what happened. It was like double 1, reroll, double 1, reroll, a 1.
You just got to laugh at those moments. That's the thing.
It was so good.
It's hilarious.
But I thought I'd draw attention to that as the most me thing.
That's very good. That's very good. I'm enjoying the saga of exploding wizards.
Exactly.
Long may it continue.
How's your painting month been?
I'm painting with Stardrake Watch 2018, Stardrake Watch April. So yeah, he's undercoated. He's, dry brush.
Really good.
He's, thank you. Yeah, he takes a dry brush real good. Mm-hmm. Those scaly monsters, just dry brush them. Don't worry about it. Just don't worry about painting all the scales. Just dry brush them. It's going to look better. I used the painting scheme, that Warhammer TV Duncan, uses in the videos, which is I think that was a good choice. I know you agonized about that. I did. And I've always felt like slightly annoyed at myself for just going at Hammers of Sigmar. I do love the colour scheme. It does look really good. I always thought, couldn't I come up with my own thing? But in this case, totally the right thing to do. Like the particular combination of, dry brush colours makes the scales look freaking awesome. I'm really happy with the way he looks. And it's just about, I've done his scales now. I've done all the bits that I've not painted before. So now it's just armour and gold, which is, pretty standard if you've, painted loads of Stormcast. It's just about going through the motions with that. And then I'm going to do some freehand kind of stars and stuff on the wings and get some nebulae on there and, really get some kind of cool weird colours going on those flat open wing spaces. Wings deceptively hard to paint.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, because you've painted a Manticore this month.
I have, yeah.
Getting the, separation between, the pinions and the actual wing flap.
Yeah.
Is a bollock.
The membrane.
The membrane, right, yeah. And the actual kind of bony kind of stuff that it's just really annoying to do that, because the sculpt is distinct, but not that distinct. Like, you've got to you've got to pick a line, and just basically freehand it to an extent, and get that clarity between them. It helps then getting some like normal oil, using oils to kind of create the darkness around the ribs, the ribbing, if you like. Then, that helps in the top as well. And also it's just, because, the ribs were the same colour scheme as the scales, I basically had to dry brush them to keep the consistency between the two. So I couldn't paint the membranes until I'd done the dry brushing on the pin.
Right. Because I'd recommend doing it the other way around.
Absolutely. Yeah, you should if you can. But because the two of the dry brush paints were actually dry brush paints.
Right.
So I couldn't just use like a layer paint to create the same effect. So I had to go and dry brush the ribs and then go in afterwards with the red for the membrane. And that is hard. Like, that could go wrong. Loads of cleanup. Looks fine now, but that was a ball ache. So yeah, you're right, Chris. So that's totally the way to do it with wings. Get the membrane down and then do the rest of it. Yeah. Probably. Much easier that way. But he's looking good. He's, I wish I'd kind of cleaned up a bit more before I started painting him. Like, there's some kind of cracks and bits I would green stuff, but I think if you were actually just looking at him, you'd never notice.
I think, honestly, I know that, not everyone's going to agree with me on this. I think some stages of model cleanup are actually overrated.
Right.
In terms of, like, the effect on your eye of looking at the model.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I mean, if you're not aiming to win a golden demon, like, don't worry about it.
If you're not gonna get it, like, really photographed for,
like, try not to have a huge hole.
professional reasons. Yeah, yeah, of course. Like, there's a lot of the Star Drake stuff, like, the wings are so big, they hide stuff as well. A lot of it's, like, on his chest, underneath the armor, and just going under, like, stuff that you're not gonna look at unless you're, like, judging a painting competition. So, whatever, to leave it. I would say, actually, I've had some problems with the undercoat on, the Star Drake. So I'm using, what's the grey Games Workshop?
Mechanica Standard Grey.
Mechanica Standard, which is very, very good, but don't spray it in sub-zero temperatures.
No.
Which is what I did, because I was really keen to get going. And and it wasn't snowing, but it was like, it was in the big kind of snow,
the crazy snow spell.
The crazy snows that we had in Britain, last month. But yeah, going out there, sprayed it seemed completely fine. But now I'm actually doing it, like, edges of stuff, like the tips of, spikes on the back of the Star Drake, the edges of, armor plates are just resisting paint. You'd paint it all up and then you leave it, and then 10 minutes later you go back and it's just showing grey on the very edges of stuff, just like here and there.
Right.
And it's weird. It's almost as though the undercoat contracted somehow once it had gone on.
Right.
And it's just something's gone wrong with it. It's fine because I could just like, Citadel base colours will eventually base it properly, like, but it has been a problem. And, I think like spraying in very cold or very hot conditions changes the properties.
Very
of the
good
coat.
spraying time of year right now.
Yeah, just mild,
Like,
right?
I did loads the other day, just to kind of get ahead of the curve.
Yeah, I might do that because I've built most of my Vanguard now, and I'm just going to get them sprayed while it's mild in the coming week or so, before it starts getting super hot.
Yeah.
So that's a tip. Look out for the temperature and conditions when you're undercoating your models. It will have long-term consequences, basically. You got loads done this week, Chris.
I've had a very busy month. So I tried to figure out earlier, like, so this month, it feels like I've done more than I have actually, but like, so in terms of units completed, this month I have painted, Blood Warriors, Skull Crushers, a Slaughter Priest, a Chaos Lord on Manticore, and 20 Brimstone Horrors.
Yeah.
And Darth Vader. But we'll get to him in a minute.
I love your corn, Chris. I think that's the best stuff you've done in terms of choice of colour scheme and
I think
vibe.
so. I think it's a more mature,
Really cool, yeah.
set of, they're all, for context, that Tom is looking at them currently. They're all on my little sideboard there. So, some of those models were already done, like the mounts for the, Skull Crushers were most of the way along at the beginning of this month. 6 of the Blood Warriors were already done, so really I painted 4 of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had a really busy month for getting that done. The spur for that was the end of the Mile High Importance painting competition.
Yeah,
because the muster was a Start Collecting box month 1, the Harbinger month 2, and an additional unit, probably a monster, month 3. And so I didn't actually meet any of the deadlines for the previous months, because my Start Collecting box was only finished this month.
Yeah.
But I did hit the final deadline altogether, and I was really happy to win gold in the competition in Bath, which was really nice.
That's
yeah.
awesome.
And actually it was really good, a little bit like how you talk about, prepping for a tournament. The process of getting ready for Multiply Importance and following that thing along at every step was really, really good. And it was really nice to finish the cornstalk collecting box, which I think was otherwise just going to languish in my shame pile, and to kind of try and push it a little bit further. So the Slaughter Priest I did for my Importance, I'd already painted a Slaughter Priest. We've been using him from Skirmish for a long time.
Yeah.
I had another version of exactly the same model from the
White Dwarf 3.
The one that I'd already painted was the White Dwarf 3 one. Yeah. So the one that I had was the stock collecting box.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm not going to cheat in the competition. I need to actually paint a Slaughter Priest. So I kit bashed him using pieces from the other pieces from the stock collecting box, Blood Warrior arm and stuff, and also the flail from a Mordheim Skaven.
Oh, nice.
Which is the oldest bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I converted him up to kit bash him, pleased with how he came out. But I had a bit of a kind of question mark over what I was going to do for that kind of like additional unit. And I ended up picking up the last Chaos Lord on Manticore in Bath. Yeah, it's an older kit. It's like an older Slaves to Darkness kit, but I really like it. It's a really nice model.
It's awesome.
And adding this sort of, and actually super quick to paint. Like, I'm really pleased with how he turned out. And part of that's color choice. But actually, like, that model took about the same amount of time to paint as the Slaughter Priest.
Oh, right.
And about half the amount of time that the War Queen took, despite being an eight times bigger. And there are a couple of reasons for that. And so I thought my tip of the month would be talking through kind of, so the first thing is I sort of had an idea of like how this, I was trying to figure out how this character is going to fit into the fiction of my force. And my idea was that I wanted like a character on a monster, but I didn't want them to necessarily be the general. So I really want the War Queen to be the general of the army.
Yeah. So
I came up with this idea of like, fantasy doesn't really have the equivalent of like Free Blade Imperial Knights in 40k, where you have these kind of like, they're mega units, but they're kind of just there to help. So my idea was, and I think we're going to try and link these ideas in a kind of cool way, because I've spoken about this already, but like, for the benefit of the pod, the idea is that, this, sort of knight on a Manticore is a kind of rogue knight, last of an order of kind of Manticore riding knights from the realm of metal, who are sort of turned to chaos, but in a kind of non-god specific way, in order to further his sort of dreams of martial conquest. But I wanted the twist to be that he is not the last of his order because he is the last survivor or the greatest hero or something like that. He is the last of his order because the rest of his order were wiped out by chaos, and most of them were taken by Sigmar. So he's actually the least worthy in some ways.
Yeah.
Like, he is the last of his kind because he was the one that wasn't worth taking by the magic gold man. And I like the idea that you're imminent to arrive in our campaign, Celestin on Stardrake might be from the same order.
Yeah, that's totally the way to go.
Like, they both ride monsters, but like, yours is one of the actual good ones that got taken.
I did a head swap on the, Celestin on Stardrake. So his head is actually one of the Vanguard Hunter.
Oh, cool. With the hair.
With the hair. And it looks fucking great. I'm so pleased with how it looks, because I really like the idea of having a face on my general. Because I think it's perfect for Tantra. So if you, listen to previous pods, you know about Tantra's fate. He's senile.
He's been reforged too many times. He's been set on fire too many times.
So a kind of, blank-faced, golem of murder that goes where Sigmar tells him. Like, it's great to have that mask for that. But I like the idea that, the guy riding the Stardrake will actually be more of a person, more of a kind of, more of a human side to him than, previous, Tantris himself. And I love, having a little bit of light and dark mirroring across the tabletop.
Yeah.
It's a nice little story.
Like, and so I kind of wanted this idea that he's this sort of rogue knight. Like, his name is going to be Gedwin Soul, which is a complicated series of Ursula Le Guin puns. But it was just after she passed away, so like Dragon Riders kind of thing. Yeah, cool. But I want him to kind of show up as a kind of free blade. And actually, because I decided that because at the moment I think the Slaves to Darkness range is quite limited. Like, there are models I like the Lord of Manticore.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of models I don't like. So what I want to build up on that side of things, I have my Khorne, and the Khorne models are great. But on the kind of, Chaos Undivided side, I want to build up a little family of heroes, really. And they won't all appear in every game.
Yeah.
But they all have interesting lack of allegiance, basically. So at the moment, that's the Dark Earth War Queen, the Dark Earth Chieftain, and this new Lord on Manticore.
Yeah, cool.
They're all part of a kind of like Chaos Undivided A-team that may show up leading armies from different god pantheons, but like will remain like an undivided core. So rather than trying to think of building an undivided army, it'll just be like a hero cadre.
Yeah.
But anyway, so to establish this kind of, free knight kind of thing, I had this idea of like the Black Knight, like the knight that shows up at the joust that no one's expecting.
Yeah.
Like, and so I thought the black was going to be like the kind of defining color. But that's really hard to figure out because, well, it's easy. It was actually quite quick in the end, but like planning it out is the way of kind of, making it not look boring.
Yeah.
Particularly because if you look at the heavy metal Manticore, it's super colorful. Loads of stripes.
Yeah.
Like, you know, they can, like, it's a really nice model. It's an older model, but it's really, really, really nice kit. And so, I think my tip for the month would be like, a lot of this has been, about thinking about materials. And so there's a lot of different kinds of black on that model. So I looked at, where I might draw out color. So there's, parts of the base which use bits from the Shattered Dominion kit, to give him kind of, he's surrounded by like a shattered bronze dais.
Yeah.
I kind of want it like imply that he's just landed in this like sort of kind of
Just crashed down
in this realm of metal kind of thing. Yeah. But that reflects the flesh tone of the membranes in the wings, which is somewhere where you can put flesh, I think. Lots of blending, like lots of mixing of colors, like the muzzle of the Manticore is Rakoth flesh mixed with grey and lots of different gradients. The eyes are bright blue. That helps kind of add a different color that is actually close enough to white that it doesn't distract from the black, which is kind of a different thing. Whereas if the eyes were bright red to go with the Khorne, it would make the whole thing feel warmer.
Yeah. Mixing grey with Rakoth. Rakoth's quite warm. It skews warm.
Rakoth is warm white.
Warm white. But mix it with a bit of grey. I don't know what grey you use at Celestra.
It's mixed actually with, Skaven Blight, Storm Vermin Fur.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And Skaven Blight Dinge.
Interesting.
But basically every material on that Manticore has, every different form of black on it has a different sort of color tree. So for its body, for the fur, there's a lot of, it's through the kind of slightly beigea range. So there's a lot of mixing. There's very little using things out directly out of the pot, but it's from a very dark mix of Abaddon Black and, Skaven Blight Dinge mixed up to, I think, Dawnstone,
cool.
which is in the kind of slightly creamier grey kind of territory. However, for the, it has like a scorpion tail, and for the pinions on the wings, like the kind of anything that would be kind of leathery or a different color, it actually mixes up towards blue.
Right.
They start with pure Abaddon Black and go up towards not Eshin Grey, Fenrisian Grey, like those kinds of colors. And then on all of those parts, the final part of it is a very thin mix of Ardcoat and Lamium Medium, which helps create a kind of shiny thing. And that helps create a material distinction between fur, like black fur, which highlights up towards a warmer grey, and sort of, barbed or kind of leathery mutant wings and tails for the Manticore, which are in a kind of shinier, slicker, colder blue.
Yeah.
And that was sort of where I combined two different kinds of black. And then for his armor, there's actually loads going on with his armor. He's magnetized as well, so I can swap him out for a sorcerer at some point. Nice. But like, for his armor and his sword, which also has similar kind of blue black thing, I wanted to avoid, like the obvious thing to do with the Black Knight is to give him black armor. But actually what I ended up doing was giving him very dull iron armor and a black helmet. which helps sell that kind of effect, but without while still making him pop from the mount.
Yeah, I was going to say, because otherwise you risk losing him, I suppose.
Yeah, like you want the rider, because being so much smaller than the mount, to still stand out. So, and so the armor is actually way more complicated than it needs to be. It's lead belcher washed with both non-oil gloss and agrax, then low shaded with a mix of Lamium medium and Doomball brown, and highlighted, or like almost high shaded with a mix of Lamium medium and Thunderhawk blue, because traditionally chrome splits between a brown and a blue gradient.
Right.
So it's a brown blue gradient created on top of a metal base coat,
okay.
which kind of creates a little bit more of a kind of vibrant metal effect. It doesn't actually come across so much in the final version because he's so overwhelmed by his mount, but I'm really pleased with the overall effect. Like, I thought it was kind of a cool character in my head, and like actually surprisingly quick to paint because like you've encountered with the Star Drake, big models go quickly.
They do, yeah. I think it's almost, it seems like the amount of time a model takes to paint is more to do with the number of techniques involved rather than the actual size of the thing itself. So a Star Drake, where it's just dry brush load of stuff, that one technique is actually quite quick. So smaller models with lots of different techniques, lots of different materials, that's what actually really takes the time.
Yeah, because there's relatively few materials on that Manticore. It's just that each of them took a bit of consideration to figure out how to do.
Then the actual execution is often not as bad as it you might think. My friend Chimp is assembling Nagash, and he's slightly terrified. It's like the biggest model, and it's an amazing model as well. Like it's so good. But I'm interested to see how he goes with it, because I think like once he starts, there's spirits, like as an orrery of spirits that holds Nagash aloft.
Don't at me.
There's an orrery of spirits that holds Nagash aloft, and that requires lots of blending into his cape and stuff, and that is difficult. But I reckon that the rest of it is probably not too bad. But if you're just dry brushing up some bones, that's not too bad. Not too bad.
But yeah, super rewarding. I'm looking forward to getting them into a game. Like I've got about 1,000 points of Khorne mixed leadership, not for match play, but for open play now.
Yeah,
so
right. That's really
that'd be
cool.
fun at some point.
Really, really cool.
Yeah. So my tip for this month is simply think about materials and think about surfaces and kind of texture, because that can allow you to do a lot with a single base coat color, which again allows you to make a much more impressive progress much more quickly. Like, I've obviously done a bunch of Brimstone Horrors, but I've also made quite a substantial progress on 30 Zangor, which, speaking of lots of stages, is going to take probably the better part of this month to finish. But like, it's made such a big difference planning out those schemes in advance and thinking a lot about materials. Like you've seen, I guess, where I've gone.
I really like the idea of mixing gloss Nuln with colour. That's a cool
I've
technique.
done magic weapons by using in successive stages Waywatcher green and non-oil gloss, which creates really nice light, dark
overlapping, but a little bit of you still get that reflectiveness from metallic paint.
Gloss,
comes through shade, and it comes through gloss even more. Like I don't know, I really like gloss shade.
Me too. Yeah, gloss shade has been one of my big kind of wins this month.
Yeah,
it has to be used sparingly, but like, that was a big point in the Manticore, right? Like it allows you to create distinctions in texture between armor and fur or whatever, and that.
But it doesn't look ridiculous. Like if you put a hard coat on it, it would look just way too much.
You have to be very careful with hard coat.
Yeah.
Like it can create a good effect, but you have to never do it undiluted. I think I made that mistake with my Harlequins from Shadow War, which I think looked good, but like, I should have diluted it. And that's, dilute your hard coat, but consider what gloss can do for you. So let's talk about the game we played this afternoon, Tom.
We did a very dramatic battle in the Star Wars universe.
In the Star Wars universe. So there's a bunch of things to say up front about this. One is obviously that Chris, have to give a bit of a disclaimer when we talk about this. We're about to talk about Star Wars Legion, which I wanted us to talk about because it's a new war game, came out last month. I think it's very relevant to this pod, relevant to both of us. However, it is specifically relevant to me because I did some work in the marketing campaign for this game. I produced and wrote and presented a series of videos for the launch week of the game, for the Fantasy Flight Games YouTube channel that went up in late March. And so I say that up front because obviously, I think I mentioned it on the podcast before, but obviously that has a bearing on how you should receive everything I say. Like, I like the game. I do. And I feel like I can give, a reasoned assessment of it, critical and positive, but I just want to be completely upfront about that, basically. Like, I have been a paid spokesperson for the game. So, I kind of, for that reason, that's why I'm interested in your impressions of it, Tom, to some extent.
Tom can say anything I want about this game.
Yeah, exactly. So
I'm free to rage.
Indeed. And I'm kind of looking forward to talking to you about it because I think, it'd be a shame not to discuss it.
I agree. It's super interesting and it kind of blends a lot of different wargaming systems. And it's a very good counterpoint to AOS and Warhammer generally, I think, as well, in terms of in design terms.
Yeah, totally. It's very, there's lots of things about it that I really like. And I think I'm glad that, I think it's very hard it's not that other games haven't come along that have successfully challenged Games Workshop's monopoly over this particular type of game, but, they tend to be kind of niche to some extent. Or they tend to, I guess, like, things like War Machine tend to have relied on, pursuing a different audience. I think this being a Star Wars game is an opportunity for there to be meaningful competition, which is only healthy.
Yeah.
In my opinion. So
sure.
yeah, I'd like to talk about that. I guess the other side of this is that because this, game that we played was, to a great extent, me introducing you to the game, Tom, that means that we probably won't do like a battle report in the traditional sense because, it wasn't like a blow by blow kind of completely even competition, let's say. Like I've been, pretty familiar with this game and its rules for a couple of months now, whereas obviously this was your first experience of it, which is again another good reason to get your first impressions of it. So let's do that.
And the game gave me everything I enjoy about wargame. Like maneuvering is important, positioning is important, objective capture. I was still in the game till the very end, and it was actually very close and interesting. Lots of interesting decisions. My first impression is that it, in one sense, declutters wargames, and then in another sense, adds loads of clutter to war games.
Yeah, right.
Which is really interesting. So, the one thing I really like about it, I like the activation system, and we'll describe it in a moment. But I think the key reason I like it compared to Warhammer is that it keeps both players in the game all the time.
Yeah.
And it's a very quick back and forth instead of just like someone doing their turn for half an hour, you doing your turn for half an hour, which, Warhammer can get a little bit like that. So the order system is very interesting. So it's quite hard to describe. Like a lot of this game is hard to describe, but when you kind of experience it, it's a lot more simple.
So I feel my role here is going to be to kind of explain some of these systems.
Yeah.
I think maybe we're best talking initially about systems that we like. So the sort of order/initiative activation system is it's original in a bunch of ways. It's a little bit like bolt action, which has this sort of I go, you go variable activation thing. But the long and short of it is, each of your units has a corresponding token, not for that unit specifically, but that for unit type. So I'm going to talk in vague terms, but like imagine you have a token that represents commanders, and a token that represents vehicles, and a token that represents troops. They don't have those exact terms, but you get the idea. And you have one of these appropriate tokens for every unit in your army. And they initially form a pool of face-down identical tokens. During the first phase of a given round, you draw, you choose a, command card from a pre-built hand of command cards and, simultaneously reveal it with your opponent. And those command cards, some of them are generic, some of them are based on the specific leader. So Darth Vader for you, Tom playing as the Empire, Luke Skywalker for me playing as the Rebels. And that command card they can have special abilities, but the simple version is it determines initiative, because some command cards are faster and some are slower. And it also determines how many units can, in the command phase of the game, be assigned a face-up order token. And what that means is let's say you play a slow card that allows you to give orders to 3 units. You then pick 3 units within a certain range of your commander, which makes commanders important rather than just for their own abilities, but for your ability to control your own troops. And you assign those units tokens directly. And you take their tokens out of the pool and you put them next to the unit physically. What that then means is when it is your turn to activate a unit, and players take it in turns to pick a unit to activate, you can either pick one of the units that you've assigned a order token to, or draw at random from the pool. And so all of your units will activate every turn. But what this means is through the command card system, Basically, I guess the long and short of it is, in a given round, you choose whether you want more control over which order your units activate in, or faster initiative.
Yep.
And that is at its basic level. And there's tons of other rules that maybe complicate this, or special abilities that bounce off this. But at its fundamental level, that is a really interesting tension.
Yeah. So, the ambush card, for example, is very, like, high initiative. I don't know.
It's the fastest
one.
Short of one upgrade that's coming in the Han Solo expansion. Yeah.
So, if you're in a situation where you just need a unit to do something before the opponent, you're going to be playing that ambush card, and you're going to be getting that one unit activation, hopefully before the opponent, unless they also play an ambush, in which case
it's a roll-off.
It's a roll-off. And that's super interesting and super cool. And I like the sort of, there's a lot of variation that you can build into that system, and lots of different ways of kind of expanding it with future expansions and card packs and stuff
and
like that.
also, it's worth stressing, you build a command hand, cards-wise, of 7 cards, but there are only ever 6 rounds in a game, and with the exception of one rubbish card called Standing Orders, whenever you've used a command card, it is then discarded for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
So that creates a back and forth with your opponent, whereas when you know the game a little bit better, a little bit like Shadespire or another system we like, if I know you have already played your fast initiative cards,
right,
I know I can probably underbid you, for example. So that creates a kind of interesting strategic back and forth from the first round of the game.
I'm guessing you can't take duplicates as well, so you can't have like
no
7 ambushes. Just
no, you can't have any duplicates.
So yeah, that's really cool, and that's an interesting sort of pacing to the game as well, because you kind of at the start of the game you're trying to get into position, so you might be playing slower cards that mean you're guaranteed to move certain number of units, but then you're making decisive strikes, and there's a lot of kind of strategic thought that goes into that, and it's very back and forth as well. The game's really interactive, and between the two players, I mean, there's a lot of modifiers and kind of back and forth that goes into the unit dice that I think could probably be streamlined, but fundamentally that you're always dicing off with your opponent, you're always talking, and it's actually, I think it's a very sociable war game actually. I really like that aspect of it.
Yeah, and there's, we don't want to get into like the weeds too much on exactly how all the rules work, but it's got a good, there's really important clarity around things like cover.
Yeah, really appreciate that.
This is one of the things I think, one of the ways it declutters war games.
Correct.
Is, it has very clear line of sight and cover rules, and particularly because it does something that I think, some elegant little bits of rule writing that I think, Warhammer could learn from, like, so your units of troops, for example, have a unit leader. Their position is the one that ultimately matters. Everyone else has to be placed in cohesion with them, but when you move that model and then replace everything else in cohesion. Yeah. And the cohesion rules are a lot more, tighter than Warhammer's. You can't do the kind of, it's basically everyone within a certain range of the leader, not everyone within a certain range of someone else from the unit. So you can't daisy chain in the same way.
Yeah, yeah.
And that means that speeds things up, because it means that you use templates for everything, a little bit like X-Wing, but like when you're moving a unit leader, you just move the unit leader and then you replace everybody else in cohesion. And it speeds things up, but it also means that for, like we've been saying before, I think in the context of playing games of Warhammer, talking to your opponent is really important. And establishing intent is really important.
Yeah.
Like, I am moving to this range. Do you agree that I am moving to this range?
For sure.
It helps with that because the rules themselves are kind of based that way. So like an example is, if cover is super important. Cover is a big part of the game, which I like because it makes terrain feel very important. I think maybe that's one of the things that I feel like when you and I have played 8th edition 40k, we've used almost like common sense terrain rules rather than the actual terrain rules.
Really true.
Which make it really hard to get cover, whereas Legion is very much a game built around cover, but it's very clear about how that works. So, for example, if your unit is obscured by waist high cover, that grants you a certain benefit on defense. However, if your unit leader isn't touching cover, then that cover also counts as cover for your opponent as well, because having to shoot past an obstacle.
Yeah.
However, if your unit leader is in base-to-base contact with the waist-high cover in question, then it doesn't count as cover for your opponent, because the notion is that they can pop up to fire over it. And that is a super clear ruling that makes that interaction feel very sensible. It feels more like a video game at that point. Like, it feels like the XCOM thing of like, okay, I have this cover now, and that is unambiguous.
It's binary, isn't it? It's just either it is or it isn't, and that's the rule. And there's no, I mean, it's always, it can get tricky when you're saying, oh, half the model must be visible. That can get like weird. But, between two, sensible people, you're going to be fine with that
Yeah.
rule set. Whereas 40k, there's so much wiggle room in the way that the new edition is better at this, but it's still not quite clear enough to stop arguments from happening.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, it's not an accident that the Legion core set comes with a stack of waist high barricades because it's so central to the game.
For sure, yeah. The cover rules are really nice. I really like the movement system. So the movement rule is you get a kind of flexible, they've got a joint in them, and there's kind of preset movement types. So you've got like slow, medium, and quick, basically.
Basically, yeah.
And everything in the game, I assume, basically fits into that.
Yeah.
That's it. That is super good and really, really clear. That sort of removes loads of the ambiguity around moving as well. And also it's just, as you said, incredibly quick. It's really, really simple to move troops around the board in a way that it's trickier in AOS and other skirmish
It's
games.
interesting because, and I think this is maybe where like, so in that sense it does declutter. Like, and I know for a fact, and I think maybe this is even one of the videos we produced, that when they were building the game, playtesting it, kind of coming up with it, it did initially use D6s and tape measures like Warhammer does.
Yeah.
And then they simplified that down to certain kind of standards for slow, medium, fast, etc. And actually, to be honest, both Age of Sigmar and 40k secretly work that way. Like, there are gradations, but broadly speaking, you know, slow is 4 inches, medium is 5 to 6 inches, fast is 8 inches plus for like most things in the game.
Yeah, that's true.
And so you could just simplify it in that way. However, like, and maybe this will move on to the way at which it reclutters things. Because of the desire to move away from D6s and tape measures towards bespoke rulers and bespoke dice and bespoke tokens, it ends up introducing a whole different kind of complexity in the form of endless iconography.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. So I think my core problem as a first impression with the game is that I like the tiers of probability that exist for units that are in cover or out of cover or pinned down. The tiers are really well defined and interesting, and the game should have that tier system. Whereas, for example, if you've got a unit in cover and you get two activations and each two sort of moves that each unit can make in each turn, so they can hunker down or they can aim and then shoot. So you can move into cover and then sort of hunker down if you want to. And that has an effect on the dice that happen. So the gradients of chance in that system, within that system are good, but the way that it's communicated, I don't think is very good, in terms of you have many different counters on a thing that are affecting different types of dice in different ways. And you're constantly cross-referencing dice symbols with, token symbols with symbols on the cards. And that is super, I think they could streamline that a lot more and keep the same tiers of chance.
I think it's interesting because this is like very typical of the way Fantasy Flight design games relative to Games Workshop. You know, when we were playing, I found myself explaining things to you in terms of like this particular, there are basically like 3 different types of dice for attacking and defending, and they go white, red, black, where white is the worst and black is the best. And that basically means essentially 5 up, 4 up, 3 up.
Yeah.
In every case. But rather than rolling the same dice with different targets, you roll different dice. And there are some other complicating factors, which is both, I get exactly what you mean. It's both more and less complicated.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, it's easier to visualize the dice pool you need to construct because it says right there on the weapon, this weapon rolls, 2 red dice and a black dice or whatever, right? But it's also like something you need to understand. Like, I've taught multiple people to play the game now and I've written tutorials for the game. So I kind of get how this feels. And like, it's sort of, you get that thing of as soon as you know what everything means, it progresses very smoothly.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned this when we were done playing, but like you roll far fewer dice than you do in Warhammer.
That's what I like about it.
But yeah, you're right. The iconography, like it's an extra thing you have to learn. Everyone knows whether or not a dice rolled more than a 4. It's whether or not something is a hit or a crit and what that means, or a surge and how that converts into a result.
Yeah.
All that stuff is like super easy when you know it, but it creates, I think, a knowledge barrier on the way in.
Yeah, for sure. And it kind of decentralizes modifiers. The whole system decentralizes modifiers, and modifiers are essential to the game. It seems like it's about, taking that activation to aim before you shoot. So you get the modifiers. In this sense, it's quite like X-Wing as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's about kind of maximizing your efficiency in the right places. But there must be a way to do that in a centralized dice system which I mean, Warhammer does this well, +1, -1 modifiers, and just listing that stuff is
yeah,
quite
I think they end up in different realms of complexity, which I think is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Like, so, one of the systems I like in Legion is the suppression system. So actually the thing Legion reminds me the most of, and I appreciate that I haven't played bolt action, so maybe it's like I'm doing some kind of bad, sort of roundabout family tree of wargame design thing here, but it kind of reminds me of Company of Heroes.
Yeah, I was thinking that as well.
The video game Company of Heroes.
Yeah, definitely. Suppression is very similar to Company of Heroes.
Yeah, in terms of, and I appreciate, like, it feels like at its core, even though obviously there are heroes and vehicles and things, it feels like at its core it is a infantry combat game, about, taking advantage of cover, strategic positioning and that kind of thing. And so the suppression system is something that I find really interesting. And from a design point of view, it's interesting to talk about how this would apply to Warhammer, how you would create the same thing in Warhammer without creating a problem. So the suppression system is this. When a unit is targeted by a ranged attack, or after that ranged attack is resolved, regardless of whether or not it was successful in dealing damage, if it's a troops unit, basically, it receives a suppression token. So basically, if it's not a vehicle.
Yeah.
Vehicles don't deal with suppression, they have some other things. If a unit is suppressed, when it activates, it rolls the worst kind of defense dice, so a 5-up, basically, for every suppression token that it has. And for every success, every 5-up success or equivalent, it removes one of the suppression tokens. However, then you figure out how many are left. And if the number of suppression tokens equals or exceeds its suppression threshold, which for the kind of generic troops of the game is 1, so if it has 1 left, it loses one of its 2 actions. So suddenly you can attack but not aim, or you can move but not dodge, etc. Which is really big. It really eats into your action efficiency, which is very X-Wing. It's very equivalent to stress in X-Wing, where you taking away actions. Although it's less extreme. It's got more granularity than stress, but it's a similar kind of idea. If the number is double your stress threshold and there isn't a commander nearby, that unit then runs the risk of breaking or panicking, at which point the only thing they're allowed to do is move as fast as they can towards the board edge. So it's your morale system built into a kind of efficiency mitigation system, which is really interesting. It means that there is a point shooting at a unit, even if they're in heavy cover and have all sorts of defensive mods.
Yeah. Because
you can potentially, if you, for example, bid quicker on the initiative, you have a chance at really fucking up their action efficiency, which is very X-Wing. It feels very, that one system seems to exist in this kind of like quantum state between how X-Wing is designed and how Warhammer is designed.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting is all of that kind of sometimes confusing token business, the activation business, that they're applying and removing different tokens whose use isn't necessarily always obvious, works very well with that system. So losing an action, which is the sort of basic thing that happens with suppression, is really big because it means you don't get to take your dice modifying things.
Yeah.
Whereas, like in Warhammer, I guess that would have to be like apply -1 to hit or something. But that then interacts with Warhammer's strategic sandbox in a way that's vastly complicated.
Yeah.
Suddenly things that trigger on 6s don't work anymore. Suddenly, or even, if it was like -1 to wound, then suddenly in 40k specifically, where thresholds are so important, that changes the effective strength values of like every weapon in the game. Whereas, even though I totally get that Legion's action system is more complicated in the moment when you're learning it, it allows for that, I think. I think trying to create the same effect in 40k or Age of Sigmar would be enormously complicated.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a mistake to have them flee towards the nearest board edge.
Yeah.
That would create some natural situations where you're actually falling back towards enemies, on occasions.
Right, yeah, that's interesting.
Because I actually, had a scenario where I fell back to the position I wanted to move them in anyway, which is odd. They should fall back away from the enemy, the thing shooting them probably. That creates some rules complexity because, what does away mean? But it feels like it's a little bit more natural. But the suppression system is very good. It's an interesting point about Company of Heroes because I actually did think that halfway through the game. I thought, I want to throw a grenade into that cover zone, right? And I think grenades are in the game, aren't
yes, they are, yeah. Which I didn't add them because I didn't want to give us too many extra complicated upgrades, but yeah.
But, the cover, and cover counter system in Company of Heroes is one of the most elegant and, brilliant pieces of RTS design in video games, and anything that kind of tries to replicate that. I mean, maybe Bolt Action does this because I've not actually played Bolt Action, because that also seems to be very much a game about getting up against walls and kind of getting flanking moves and disrupting cover. And also the ratio between infantry and armor is very similar to Company of Heroes as well in terms of, you've got very specified types of damage in Legion where, there's certain stuff that is just anti-vehicle and, none of your other infantry stuff is really going to damage vehicles at all. So it's about I really like that, having very specialized weapons that are very good against one thing, because that makes maneuvering them into position interesting and essential to actually capture them. So there's loads of stuff I like about it. And OS doesn't really have that in the same way. Like, in 40k, you've got like armor piercing and stuff. But there's a problem, and not sure it's a problem. In the AOS and 40k, you can mega dice stuff off. You can get just a billion cultists and double their attacks and roll 200 dice at a tank, and they can fuck it up. That's not how tanks work. I like the idea that vehicles in Legion and a lot of other game systems, small arms fire is not going to hurt them, and you're going to have to actually get the right weapon in the right place to deal damage to that thing. That's a good strategic challenge.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like there's Legion, despite being called Legion and despite being sort of, I guess, the closest Fantasy Flight have come to kind of building a challenger to 40k, it's a sci-fi war game about armies clashing, does have smaller unit counts. Like your troops choices can't go above 6 models. You're pretty limited in the amount of special weapons you can bring. There is inherently baked into the rules as they exist at the moment, not a lot of min-maxing. It's a skirmish game, really. Like, it's a mid-sized, war game, I'd say. Like, you absolutely can play up to a very high number of models, but even the way the command card system works is kind of designed with the idea that you're probably never going to have more than like 8 units. Even at, so to give you some context, Tom, because I appreciate, we just played with the contents of the core set.
Yeah.
Which I think is probably about the equivalent of 2 Warhammer stock collecting boxes fighting each other. More balanced than that might be, because then they vary enormously, but like the equivalent of like, hero, 2 troops, and a vehicle of some kind.
Yeah.
And a full game of kind of competitive points limit is about double that.
Okay.
Maybe double that and a bit.
Yeah.
Depends exactly on what you take. But like, we played, I set us up with a 4 foot by 3 foot board. The, standard Legion competitive size is 6 foot by 3 foot. So not that much bigger.
Yeah.
So, we were in the ballpark of what, not miles away from what a full game might look like. Whereas Warhammer is designed to scale, like all the way up to 3,000 point afternoon spanning mega games. And that's, I think, a big difference. Like, like Company of Heroes, which was like, in a world of Total Annihilation, Command and Conquer, the game that sort of said, what if squads fighting each other had lots of room for interesting maneuvering? It feels like almost that is a scale difference.
Yeah,
well.
That's interesting. That is interesting. They move like, the squad movement as well is just like Company of Heroes. It's really similar. It's weird. Like, maybe that's, Company of Heroes was riffing off wargame design, or I don't know.
I think so. Yeah, like
chicken and egg, isn't it?
This is why I kind of my lack of experience with Bolt Action feels like because given the Bolt Action is a World War II infantry centric strategy game, tabletop game, I sort of feel like that might have been basically I can kind of imagine the listener gritting their teeth at the fact that we are comparing Legion to Company of Heroes, so we should be comparing it to Bolt Action.
Yeah.
But I think actually one thing I like about that is, for me, I feel like Legion has a place in the kind of list of war games that I play because the scale is slightly more manageable than 40k or Age of Sigmar. it exists. And the goal is slightly different as well. Like, sort of feels like, between Shadespire and, maybe this and then Warhammer, there's sort of a gradation of experience. Like, I think Legion offers more interesting tactical variety with a small number of units than maybe the equivalent 500-point game of Age of Sigmar would, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, the units, specialize in interesting ways as well, which I like, in a way that, for example, a load of Liberators can't. Like a Liberator's Liberator, Judicator can shoot, but they're all basically just 2 wound, 4+ save things. Whereas in Legion, the troops are kind of, what troops can accomplish that's an interesting, balance threshold. Whereas like, it felt kind of hard for troops to get things done decisively. It feels like, they're not really going to wipe anything out quickly. They're there to suppress, they're there to sort of just, almost just fill the room. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's an interesting contrast to AOS where, units are, you're looking for big punches that wipe stuff out, and it's much more decisive and dramatic in that way, but also much more dicey, and there's a lot more variance in that system. Whereas it feels like Legion, fairly consistent damage output from units, so it's more predictable in that way. And Heroes are very decisive. So they've packaged all of the decisive super wipeout stuff onto Darth Vader, onto Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, which felt very appropriate. And that's really interesting. Like, I found that, like, cause obviously I have, the big advantage I came into our game with, and actually, like, was I have a sense of those probabilities because I've played more games, right? It's just based on experience. Like, I know a little bit more about what to expect, when to aim, when to dodge with troops. And I can plan ahead a little bit further because of that. And, one of the ways that the core set is balanced is in combat, Darth Vader is the scariest thing in the game. There's really nothing that can stand against him, and that's appropriate to the story and the fiction. However, Darth Vader is slow. It takes a while to get into combat. He doesn't charge or leap or jump. Luke can do those things. And that's appropriate as well. Like, I like that it doesn't quite, even though it is a game, it doesn't quite get into the kind of video game force, which is something Star Wars as a whole enterprise is moving away from.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons The Last Jedi has a very different idea about the force. Pablo Hidalgo, who's Lucasfilm's head of story group, or was, I think he still is, tweeted something really nice recently, which was that, maybe slightly off topic, but that, that like in Star Wars in the original trilogy, the Force was never a series of video game powers that you unlock.
Right.
It's, it's far more spiritual than that. And that's the thing Star Wars should be moving back to. People get frustrated with the way they see the Force being used in the new movies because it doesn't cohere with a very, very video game interpretation of Force power as it exists in the prequel movies and in the video games. And I like the fact that Legion doesn't turn Vader into a leaping, kind of teleporting, magic man in the way that, like, for example, the Battlefront video games have, where he can just jump and charge and run. Like, Vader is a kind, like, more like the end of Rogue One. He is a juggernaut that marches towards you, deflecting blaster bolts as he goes. He's very hard to stop. And if he gets into range, in a game where, two squads of troopers in cover exchanging gunfire will result in 1 casualty each per turn. Yeah. Vader getting into melee combat is a dead squad. Or a dead tank, or a dead but it's about getting him there, which is a good trade-off, right?
Like, absolutely.
Whereas Luke is worse at everything, but more flexible, which is appropriate as well. And one of the things that, like, that means is, and Luke and Vader are 2 of the only units that can really counter each other's attacks because they each have lightsabers.
Yeah.
So there's this kind of interesting balance, and I knew how to kind of leverage that against you to use a combination of timing and command cards and things to basically wipe out Vader with Luke before anything could happen. But long story short, that meant that the onus for heroic action in that game fell to Luke. I couldn't rely on something equivalent to, like, I just pulled out D6 mortal wounds from this troops unit to kill Darth Vader.
Yeah.
Like, it kinda has to be Luke that takes him out. It can be done otherwise. Like, you can whittle him down. You can cause problems for him. You know what I mean? But the only kind of delete this hero button is another hero, which is a way that Warhammer isn't necessarily balanced.
Yes.
And that has good consequences for Warhammer as well. Like Warhammer can have the hero troops unit that holds on, wins the game for you in a way that I don't think Legion really can. But I quite like that those heroic moments tend to settle around those characters.
Yeah, it's like, not that one is good or bad or the other is worse than the other. It's just, it's a very different design approach to it. And I think Legion does eliminate a lot of the bad feelings that dice make happen sometimes.
Yeah.
Because if you can put a unit of fulminators or a very powerful unit into something, or your general, and you can totally whiff the dice, and that feels really bad. Whereas Legion, you can whiff, but it doesn't, like, the dice do seem more consistent to me. The system they created seems like more consistent.
I think it might obfuscate the results a little bit as well while you're learning it.
Yeah, maybe that's it as well. It's like you don't think, oh, I've failed. That should have been 3 2+ rolls. I should have got an X. You know?
Well, we had a turn, like, the perfect example of this. We had a turn where I kind of did my Luke Skywalker play, which took Darth Vader out of action. When units are engaged with each other in melee combat, they can't be targeted by ranged attacks.
Yeah.
By either side. But I knew that because I took out Darth Vader in melee combat, that would then expose Luke to your, completely out in the open to your stormtroopers. He had a dodge token, which is an important thing. And functionally, I then ended up in a situation where I rolled, if it was Warhammer, I would have rolled 6 saves, 6 3-up saves, where every 6 reflects a mortal wound to reflect the lightsaber deflecting blaster bolts.
Yeah.
That is mathematically what happened.
Yeah.
And what I rolled was, I rolled 5 successes, 1 failure, and 1 6, basically, equivalent. So I deflected a mortal wound back, and only took 1 damage, which is only slightly above average. Like, it is above average. Like, really, I should have failed 2. I should have taken 2 damage, because it's 6 3-ups, right? So if we're talking pure law of averages. And the fact that didn't happen is lucky, but actually in the moment, you really didn't have much of a sense of how lucky I had got, because I'm relying on dice symbols that are not traditional numbers.
Yep.
Like, when we sat down and looked at it, it's like, I got lucky, but not like mega lucky. Like, I could have, you know what I mean? It was just like, this is about right.
Yeah, yeah.
But you're still learning that. And so I think they both obfuscate the dice in a way that makes it feel less bad, but also maybe make it take longer to gauge what you can expect from a given round of shooting, for example.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think also just having 1 roll, on the attack instead of the tiered rolls that Warhammer has.
Yeah, there's no wound roll.
Exactly. So of course Warhammer, you're rolling to hit, then you're rolling to wound, then modifiers, then saves. Whereas this is just like 1 roll, and I like the elegance of that, and I think that's a good way to stand out from Warhammer. The interactions between, troops attacking one another are very fast, but it still builds in a lot of complexity and modification and lots of kind of gradation of cover and
like cover. If an infantry unit is in cover, it just cancels 2 hit results.
Yeah,
outright.
yeah, that's really elegant. I think there's stuff I really like about it, but it's almost the way it's communicated to you through tokens and through just bits and pieces that grates the most for me. And I'd look forward to playing more of it. And especially with I think a slightly larger force, I think the randomization of order draws becomes more significant, and I wonder to what extent that feels bad if you really want to move something, or to what extent it's just fine.
But you have control over whether or not you have control over that. Basically.
Yeah, exactly. So you do have a hand in it, which I like. It's good. I think it's very. I like how fast it is as well. Like we were just learning to play, so obviously it's much slower because you're kind of. I was getting to grips with the system and stuff, but it's still. How much long would it take? Like
2 hours, maybe?
2 hours, something like that.
Yeah,
so you could play a game in an hour. I think if you're well versed in it, which bodes well for tournament play and stuff like
with
that.
the core set,
if that's where they want to go. There are a lot of cards. There are a lot of every unit has a card, and there are like tiny cards for each upgrade they can have and stuff like that. So rather than just having like 1 wall scroll with everything listed on it, you're dealing with loads and loads of cards, and it feels like that's a place where they're going to monetize that. And there are aspects of the game where I worry that it would get super expensive if you start having to swap cards into other sets and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. So at the moment, because I've experienced this firsthand from X-Wing, at the moment, So for example, they've put out the core sets, quite a lot of expansions already. So extra stormtroopers, extra rebel troopers, the AT-ST, etc.
Yeah.
The same upgrades come in both the stormtrooper and rebel trooper pack. So if you get either of them for your chosen faction, you will get the upgrades that you need.
Yeah.
That's true at the moment. I can't talk about anything else, but like, in that I don't know.
Yeah.
And so and I can get that concern. And like, I have first-hand experience from X-Wing that having rules written on cards rather than in codexes can cause complexity when it comes to FAQs and things. I think there is a benefit to having the rules printed on the tabletop in front of you. There's a lot less flicking between pages or consulting an app.
For sure.
However, I kind of get why people, kind of get nervous about it. The question of cost is an interesting one because we played with the contents of the core set, which is, I think, 80 quid. Which gives you a decent game. Like, you're not going to get a huge amount of variety out of those pieces.
That's a good starting box, definitely.
And then I think the rest of the expansions and things are relatively competitively priced compared to GW stuff. They kind of vary. I think the vehicles are actually quite good value. The AT-ST, which was in the first range of expansions, is a posable model. It's bigger than an Imperial Knight. It's massive. And it's really nice. It's what I think with the Airspeeder, it's my favorite model in the set. And that looks pretty competitively priced for a kind of centerpiece thing. But maybe as we've, already said, like, these models, I think for me are more, like game pieces than sort of display pieces in the way that I would consider my Warhammer stuff to be. I mean, this has been your first impression of them, so I'd be interested to see what you thought.
Yeah, I do agree with that. They were actually better than I was expecting them to be. And I really like the sort of the posing on the Darth Vader. That's nice. But I think it's helped by the fact that Star Wars as a universe, its iconography isn't super detailed. A lot of the Imperial armor is a fairly basic geometry and just like flat surfaces and no like filigree or any of the kind of, cause it really tells that, Games Workshop is a universe designed for miniatures so that you can inject all that detail into your sculpts, right? Whereas of course the Stormtrooper sculpts, like you just can't get beyond a certain level of detail with it. So you don't necessarily need the same level of, mold detail on this kit. So I think that they've done a good job with the posing, because basically that's all you kind of can do with Star Wars is just nail the movie look, basic geometry, and then get the posing right. And the posing is pretty good on the Stormtroopers. It's very good on Darth Vader and Luke. And I mean, you're not going to see these miniatures popping up on like the Best Minis websites, the painting websites that, people elevate them to incredible standards, but it's going to look like Star Wars and it's going to feel like Star Wars, and it's basically nailed that level of things. Yeah.
I actually almost find it like a little bit of a relief. So I've only painted one model in the set, which is Vader.
Yeah.
And, maybe continues the theme of me spending a lot of time painting things that are black this month, but like, all I did really was base coat it, do a lot of different shades of mixed grey, so Abaddon black and various kinds of mixing in like Mechanicus standard grey and things.
Yeah.
And then shading it with different kinds of shades, so a bit of null oil matte, null oil gloss, odd coat, mixed with lamy and medium. Obviously picking out the details and things. And that was kind of enough. Like, I feel like GW style high contrast highlighting is very much a Warhammer house style thing. And I think maybe we mentioned this when Legion was first announced and before I was working anywhere near it. For me, Star Wars is something to be adhered to like bolt action, like a military historical game.
Yeah.
Rather than as a fantasy game where I have my own stamp on it.
Right.
Like, I want things to look appropriate to the films. So Stormtroopers, I'm going to fill in the black and white details and then give them a light gloss with hard coat and probably leave it.
Yeah.
Like, because that's what Stormtroopers look like. They are, the Star Wars tends to be both a lightly grubby and a muted palette. Prequels notwithstanding. But even their grubby kind of dented rebel vehicles aren't anywhere near as messed up as your average Space Marine tank.
No, you're not going to be going crazy with weathering on there or putting Rise of Rust on your speeders or anything like that.
No, and you can see people, and I think it's fine to approach them the same way you would a GW miniature, but I just, like, for me, that doesn't feel right. And almost that's a relief. Like, I want to get them to the same standard as the average X-Wing paint job. I want it to feel atmospheric and functional.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's almost nice to have something that doesn't demand the same level of like, I say this as someone who, is painting 30s Angor. So I know what filigree is like, you know what I mean? As a
filigree hell.
And the thing is that would look absurd on film. They're designed for different things.
Right,
and I
right.
kind of just want to get a little filmic sense of them. And
Yeah. I felt like the Legion did a very good job of communicating the Star Wars universe. I think they've done a very good job of that, which is great. And it did feel really atmospheric. Like, obviously they're not all painted up yet, the core set, but even then, like, stormtroopers look cool. The weapons are well defined, like the special weapons of, easy to spot, and, the visual language of the sculpts very clear. And I'm not sure what more they could really do with Star Wars than they've already done. So.
I pretty much don't like every time anyone in any medium have tried to figure out how do we make a stormtrooper just a little bit extra.
Right, for sure. Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like that way, like, and it's funny because you could argue that your Space Marine, your Warhammer Space Marine is someone asking the question, how do we make a Star Wars Stormtrooper just a little bit more?
Right.
Cover him in skulls and make his shoulder pads bigger than his head. Like, and I love Space Marines. You know what I mean? It's just that for me, it's about the appropriateness of the universe. And
For sure. And we talked about this, in a podcast last year when we were talking about Warhammer 40,000 8th edition, and the sense that the Primaris Space Marine sculpts were about decluttering Space Marines again so that they could reclutter them for the next decade.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's kind of that's the loop that Games Workshop is on. But that's a loop that Legion doesn't have to even engage in.
Yeah. So having now played it, is this something that would tempt you to play more?
I'd certainly play more of it. I think it's pretty good, actually. And there's a lot of interesting sort of meaty tactical goodness to be had in modifications and efficiency and maneuvering that makes it good war game. Good war game.
Good. I'm glad. I'm
like
glad.
it.
Yeah. And once again, my disclaimer.
Yeah.
But no, I genuinely do like it. Like, it's one of the reasons I wanted to work on it. So I kind of say that from a position of honesty. It's like I was excited to do the stuff I ended up doing for the marketing campaign because I genuinely think there's interesting ideas in it.
Yeah.
And it can really happily coexist.
That's what I like about it. It's a great counterpoint to 40k. It's a great counterpoint to those other games, and it feels different enough to be its own thing. And I would watch people playing it in a tournament setting. Kind of, I would put that on in the background on Twitch or whatever. It's got that quality to it potentially. So yeah. Hopefully has a good future ahead of it.
Cool.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The Codex Commandments.
I've been trying to figure out the version of the Hercules Mulligan introduction where it says like, it's hard to have sex over 4 sets of codex.
That's
but it's not there yet.
It's got to workshop that a little bit. It's almost there.
If you're confused about what Tom and I were just talking about, it's because we just took a break before doing questions, which we're about to do. But unfortunately, I have introduced to Tom the only question worth answering, which is how to most accurately write Warhamilton, the Warhammer musical.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably good that we didn't record what just happened because it was too mind blowing, and that we can't.
I kind of low key revealed to Tom that I spent 3 weeks since I saw Hamilton, trying to write either an Abaddon or Ahriman musical in my mind. Which has ruined almost every waking thought I've had.
And now it will ruin mine.
Yeah, exactly.
So we thought we'd spare you the specifics unless you ask us about it. So
might be nice.
Okay. Good times.
Should we do some questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Finian Beasley writes, hi chaps, I love painting metallics, but most of GW's metallic paints are garbage and can be no better than applying glitter to your models. To that end, I decided to give metallic Sharpies a try, especially for doing detail work such as gold trim. It turns out they're brilliant. They go on really good coverage, dry fast, and take washes well. Not applicable to all situations, especially large areas. I thought of Chris complaining about painting all that Zinch filigree. You might want to give it a try. Thanks to the meaty monthly podcast, Finn. So I wouldn't agree that all GW metallics are garbage, because I paint with a lot of them.
Yeah,
They can be finicky though,
good,
for sure.
But yeah, they're quite temperamental, aren't they? You've got to really shake them as well, like, otherwise, who knows what they're going to behave like. I've heard lots of people talking about Sharpies though, as a way to get
after we got this email, because it's been a little while ago now, I actually did experiment with this on some of my Zangor, and it's okay, but actually, I think, and maybe this is just kind of based on experience, but I feel much more comfortable with a brush than a pen. Like, because a lot of the time you're reaching around details to reach smaller details, and pens aren't designed for that. They're big chunky things with big tips. Like, it's okay for some things. It would be okay if every model was standing straight upright like an ultramarine with, just shoulder pad trim to do or something like that.
It's perfect for that.
But for reaching around, like a brush is better for reaching around detail. So, like, Sharpies like sound on paper like cheating, but actually I think they make some things harder.
Interesting.
There are also like acrylic paint pens, which is something I was also considering, which is basically the same thing. But, I certainly think interesting tools like that could have a place, but like, actually I'm going to stick with a brush. Also because you can do things like, you know, painting from a weird angle with the edge of a brush, which are much harder to do with a pen simply because of the size of a Sharpie.
Just edging and stuff. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but an interesting suggestion. I think it depends what armor you're doing, basically.
Yeah, I could certainly think of some places where there was quite flat filigree on armor plates where if you're doing like a matte armor color with silver edging, that I can imagine that being super convenient. But yeah, you're right, it depends on the sculpt, doesn't it?
It does. Like, yeah. But nonetheless, worth considering other tools like that. We've got a big hobbycraft that just opened near us.
I was in there last week.
It's good, isn't it?
Yeah, I built an entire like Warmaster set out of some foam board I bought there and some card and some glitter pens. So, yeah, Warmaster is like a 2004 big, massive scale war game that Games Workshop did. It's basically like Epic, but for fantasy, Warhammer Fantasy.
Yeah, I remember it very well.
Yeah, and it's supposed to have like a really strong rule set, and on paper they sound great. And so I thought, instead of going onto eBay and spending far too much money, I'll just cut up some foam boards and then play with this, which is actually recommended in the rulebook, which they would not do now. But in the rulebook it says, hey, just cut out some bits of cardboard if you want to try this out. It's actually in the official Warmaster rulebook, which is available online, and it's not in print, it's not being sculpted, so I feel alright about going and getting that for free.
But yeah, nonetheless, what are we talking about?
I don't know. I just sort of said that. I sort of said it.
Our next question comes from Chris, who writes, "Hi, mini butt painters." I think he's referring to the ass drilling. In fact, I would say, so, I'll put a picture in the show notes, I think, of one of the sub-assembly stages of my Chaos Lord on Manticore. Just to save that.
Yeah, okay.
Because he's magnetized right up his ass.
Right.
And
it's a magnet right up there.
So, to paint him, I glued a magnet to the top of a chopstick. So I had a stick to mount him on.
Oh no.
And so now he lives in
painful
a
existence.
position of relative dignity atop his mighty Manticore steed. The greater part of his painting life was spent, mounted buttwards upon a chopstick held in a pint glass, which is not the greatest amount of dignity I've ever afforded.
He should have chosen Sigma.
He should have done, yeah. I don't think it's a matter of choice. Anyway, Chris writes, I've been out of the gaming and collecting side of the Warhammer and 40k hobby for over 10 years, but I still enjoy the fiction, art and lore that surrounds it. As I have many fond memories of gaming with friends and classmates throughout my teens and early 20s, I've been pondering that perhaps this misspent youth could actually prove to be useful for the old grey future me of 2018. I have two sons. The eldest is almost 6 and has been diagnosed as high-functioning autistic. For him, this means he has a fantastic memory, his reading, spelling, vocabulary and maths are way above his classmates. Where he suffers most is in social interaction. He finds it difficult in sharing other children's games, understanding body language and facial expressions, all of which make it hard for him to make or keep a friendship. His hand-eye coordination is rather poor too. Colouring within lines is difficult, but with practice it has improved. So, as an evil husband to a very understanding wife, I brought up the idea of introducing our son to the wargaming hobby as a way for him to meet new people and to learn some social interaction skills, all while having the clearly defined rules of the game to fall back on when he gets stuck for words or does not understand a situation. Maybe he could even improve some of his creative skills by painting miniatures in terrain, or by helping me create and write stories around his favourite characters, who knows. So I thought I'd pitch it to you as follows. What do you think about a 6-year-old getting into wargaming? What is a good age? What positives and negatives could there be for someone with social anxieties and or autism? Do you think that AOS or Shadespire would be an appropriate introduction to my son, or is there something else more appropriate? By the way, he's obsessed with dinosaurs and loves the photos of my old Lizardmen army. He really likes the flesh-hounded corn models he saw in Games Workshop store, any way of using them in Shadespire. Thanks for the awesome pods, Chris. P.S. he writes, Nagash plus Stormcast Eternals equals Necrons.
Oh, he's not wrong about that.
No. So obviously we are not experts.
Yes.
Like, I know anything I have to say about this is purely anecdotal. So I want to kind of stress that up front. Like, no substitute for actual guidance by people who know what the fuck they're talking about.
Indeed. Yeah, I think the good thing about this hobby is that there are so many layers of investment to it that you can sort of test the waters. So you can play a casual game, just father and son, and sort of escalate it in gradual ways. So, playing with a friend, then perhaps going to, a sort of more risky social situation like a shop or something. I mean, there's a ladder there, right? Where you can kind of test things out and see kind of how someone might respond to different levels of investment.
I have some first-hand experience of this because a lot of, I know a few people who play X-Wing with their sons. Not, I believe, sons on the spectrum, but, nonetheless, I've seen how wargaming can be a good way for kids to have a dialogue with adults, based on mutually understood principles. Both in the context of interacting with a stranger across the table, but also actually having something to talk to your parents about that isn't a parent thing versus a kid thing.
Sure.
Like, I think one of the things that I found most charming about watching people play these games with their young sons and daughters is that, like, actually it's a rare example of something that might not have been that common outside of basically football a generation ago, which is a subject matter where parents and their children have equal interest. It's not like I, as your parent and the figure of authority, I'm teaching you this thing. It's, we share this genuinely. And that I think can be very good for creating that bond. I think also, like I say, like, not an expert on this, but wargaming does provide a medium for people to share an interest and share a common set of assumptions about a situation. I think that's just generally useful for people who are anxious socially in any context, let alone, on the spectrum in any way.
It does create a framework, though, I mean, we were discussing earlier in the episodes that it does create, conflict potentially. So I think that's something to bear in mind, that rules arguments, definitely when I was a kid playing Warhammer, loads of rules arguments all the time. It was like loads of that. Yeah. So that's something to bear in mind, especially if you're youngsters playing, potentially gonna be getting into loggerheads over certain things. And if that's something you're worried about,
I would say that, the Chris asked specifically about being able to use Flesh Hounds of Khorne in Shadespire. And actually, the new Khorne warband that's coming out next weekend includes a Flesh Hound of Khorne.
It does.
However, I would say that for this purpose, Age of Sigmar is a better choice because you have more control over the rule set with Age of Sigmar.
Yeah.
You can make it more or less complicated. You can include more or fewer models in a way that you can't with Shadespire, which is really quite a tightly designed competitive game and doesn't really work if you start relaxing the rules in that way.
For sure.
I think Age of Sigmar Skirmish is much more appropriate.
Skirmish is a good one. I mean, especially if you just embrace the fact that Skirmish is kind of broken as a rule set. It's a really good, broken is the wrong word. It's unbalanced if you treat it as a hardcore competitive thing, but that's not the spirit that is intended to be played with. I mean, Skirmish is supposed to be a casual knock around with just a few models, and you can make up spells, you can get creative with it. I think with a kid, that would be a fun time, and build stories out of it. And that's very low pressure as well.
Yeah. And it can build up into the things like, I would say that, I would lean on the dinosaur side of things. Like the Seraphim Start Collecting box is
super nice. Yeah.
Super nice. Big dinosaur to paint. Like, that stuff's quite forgiving as well. It dry brushes really well.
For sure.
I think AOS is a good angle here. And like, I think initially it's just a way of having fun and enjoying a hobby. But if it does mean that, people can go into a shop and talk to strangers about a shared interest, that might be helpful socially. That's the thing I feel less confident saying is definitely the case.
For sure. I mean, I think it depends so much on, the child specifically and how they would react to different situations, which obviously we can't comment on. But, again, it's structured and you can choose the level of structure around it. It's very malleable, it seems like, as a social thing. Like, you really can define the rules around it and behaviors around it. I think it's a cool idea. I really agree with you, Chris, about games like this giving kids a place where they're equal to parents, and also, I think whenever I played games with my dad and stuff, just having your ideas recognized and enjoyed by an adult is actually a really positive thing and a really good experience and a confidence building thing as well. And I took that into creating stories around models and around other things with my friends. Like a lot of that, the way we entertained ourselves and long, boring afternoons was story generation basically, and just bouncing off each other and making up jokes. I think that those things are links to wargaming and to D&D and a lot of these structured social things. This is kind of like off point, but the gaming as a whole thing is super, super cool for giving people a way of swapping ideas and bouncing off each other.
Absolutely. Yeah, basically, yes.
Yes. In answer to your question,
Yes.
yes, Nagash and Stormcast would make a Necron army.
Next, James writes, Dear Minches Monthly, sitting at my desk on a Saturday highlighting corn red robes after a wash of Nuln oil, I'm thinking, gosh, if this isn't my hobby happy place. It's not too hard, it looks good, and I can zone out while it almost does the work for me. What is your hobby happy place, chaps? James?
I know exactly what he means. I know exactly. Like, when you've got a technique down and you just do it and you just see it coming to life before your eyes and it just looks beautiful every time you do it. It's great. Gold for me, obviously.
Yeah.
Endless gold for Swordcast. Always looks good. Getting that, Reichland Flesh Shade gloss on it.
That fresh shade.
Fresh shade.
Fresh
shade.
Fresh shade of flesh shade. I need to stop writing fucking rap operas about Warhammer.
Do you though, Chris?
No.
Do you need to stop? Could be great. Yeah, totally. Well, I think that's a great thing about, or dry brushing the Star Drake as well. It's just, it's not sure about it to start with, but then you just, it's basically like minimum effort, maximum reward at that point, because it just sort of comes to life. You don't have to think about it, and it feels good. It feels good.
I think for me, it's gemstones. I love, because usually if I've gotten to the gemstone stage of Zinch model, that means I'm near the end.
Thank God.
Yeah. But like, I've got like, I like patterns. I like, alternating what color a gem is on two versions of the same sculpt, that kind of thing, to kind of create variation within a unit. So it's it's a small space, so it's quick. It's maximal variation potential. Mm-hmm. It looks good. It's one of those eye-catching things. And there's something really satisfying about base color, little lick of highlight on the bottom, fine highlight on the bottom, and then a cheeky wink of bone or white, top right corner, closest to the light. You've got yourself a gemstone.
Lovely. That is a good technique.
That I think is, that's an all-round happy place for me, I think. Cause I get like dry brush anxiety, even when I'm doing like big mass stuff like that. I like the finishing touches. Those are the bits that make me happy.
Nice.
Next question comes from Kingsley, who writes, Hi Chris and Tom, having recently painted up the Shadespire starter set, I've realized that a pile of skulls or a bit of giant statuary can really make a base more than just a boring circle for minis to stand on. I bought a hole punch, which makes little maple leaves out of baking paper, which adds a bit of autumnal colour to a base. This looks pretty good, but still leaves the bases looking kind of flat. What are your favourite additions for spicing up a base? Thanks for dropping those pods. Kingsley.
Skulls are amazing.
Yeah.
I love
omni-useful texture unit.
Absolutely. And a neutral colour that is unlikely to clash with or ruin anything that you particularly do.
It's not a miracle that skulls ended up fucking everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. The weird thing, when you really think about how skulls are used on the bases, the skulls are always facing the same direction as the character. Isn't that super weird?
I tried to break that with my corn.
Yeah.
Like sometimes they have left a skull behind, but like not a lot.
But, there's nothing kind of, more jarring than a base where the skull is facing backwards away from the front of, isn't that weird?
Yeah, it is.
It's a kind of true
It's weird
thing.
that's weird. It's weird.
But it is. So like the skull facing away from them, like towards the back of the model is somehow wrong. It just looks stupid. I've tried it. Skulls are fantastic. And I wouldn't get hung up on, isn't it dumb that there's a human head on every base that you've got in your army? But that is excellent. I think, the thing I'm working through at the moment with regards to bases is creating like naturalistic formations of rocks and tufts and things to make it look as though I haven't just sort of like some of the bases I've done. It looks like I've just put some PVA glue on it and then just plopped some stuff down. And there's definitely a skill to creating a realistic looking formation of rocks and things.
Yeah, I've started, like, I tend to think about proportions and kind of like one unexpected element into kind of proportionally positioned elements.
Yeah.
Like kind of triads and things. The other side of it is for a few models, including the Lord of Manticore, Dark Earth War Queen, I've started using milliput to build up mounds on bases and embedding texture elements like pieces of rock and stuff into them.
Cool. That's a good idea.
Because it means that things rise from different elevations and that makes it look a lot more natural.
Yeah. So just having perfectly flat.
So if you look at the base for the Manticore, actually, you'll see that there are hills on it that help hide the fact that the 3 pieces of sort of shattered terrain and metal terrain all are at the same elevation.
Yeah.
The fact that there are mounds of milliput help make it look more like a buried ruin or something.
Yeah. Elevation is definitely a brilliant way of making distinguishing models. I've used it to great effect with my Vanguard Hunters, where there's loads of slate where they're kind of angled, and the poses on the Vanguard Hunters so good, but that you could tilt them slightly, and it looks as though they're adjusting their weight, and they look really, really super dynamic. I've kind of kit bashed, I bought an Eve Black Talon, and I've kit bashed a head out of a Retributor helmet, because the helmet that comes with an Eve Black Talon is not very good. It's really, really small. Like a Retributor helmet and a plume, like a really large plume from a different kit from Paladors, I think. And she's going to be leaping off a rock. So I've picked the rock out, glued it to the base, and it's going to look really anti-gravity and have loads of dynamism. So using that bit of elevation like that is really...
I tried to do that with the War Queen. She's running, like, by default, she's kind of like striding over a rock, but I got rid of her normal rock and gave her a slope to run up, made of milliput and slate, because I wanted to look like she was running up something in order to jump off it, basically.
Yeah.
There's lots you can do.
If you use the base to accentuate the pose, that's always a nice way to do it.
Basing's great. Basing's the best.
That's another satisfying part of the hobby, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the most fun and has the biggest effect on the model.
Yeah.
It's really easy.
Yeah, that's true.
Our next question comes from 14 for 14 Miniatures Monthly question, combo meter breaker Pete, who writes, "Hello, Starforged Senior Hammer and Sky Thurston on disc. My burning question this week is a project ever over? I almost always imagine eventually having a huge collection of any faction I buy into, even if they're originally a small skirmish force. Is this the natural compulsion of the hobbyist, or do I have a full-blown problem? Love the pod, Pete/Fienia from Discord."
I used to think models weren't done, but now I think, there's a point where if you keep on going back with new skills, you're never actually going to fundamentally improve the model, and it's actually better to start a new one with everything you've learned, and you'll get a better executed thing, and sort of let those old models lie, if you know what I mean. Like I tried to go back to my old Liberators that I painted when I was first getting back into this years ago, and went over one and it didn't look any better really. You've already slapped all the paint on it. Short of stripping it and doing it again, those are finished. They're just done.
Yeah, that's fine.
And that's fine. So I'll buy some new Liberators one day and paint those up.
Yeah, I think actually recently I've realized that they are. Like, I have a few sort of miscellaneous Khorne models that I haven't done, but I kind of consider my Khorne done for now.
Yeah.
Like, about 1,000 points. That's fine. Like, I'd like to move on to other things.
Yeah.
I don't think that will ever be a 6,000 point Megaforce. Similarly, I think it's really healthy to feel like, actually, this is the point where I won't play with more than this.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need more than 30 Zangor. It's not worth the time investment for the novelty of a game where I have 2 blocks of 30. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Like, realistically, I don't need that. And actually, this is sort of, been on my mind recently, because the other thing I've done this month is I've started the process of, I actually had quite an aggressive cull of my shame pile by selling some stuff off. Yeah. So I sold, to Pete, actually, who wrote this question, the Death Guard half of my Dark Imperium box, including the models I'd already painted.
Probably never going to paint those.
Yeah, and it's because I had that feeling of like, I'm probably never going to paint these.
Yeah.
And I realized that there are other 40k forces I'd like to get around to first. Maybe one day I decide that Death Guard are cool. But actually, realistically, I'm more excited about Space Marines, I'm more excited about Thousand Suns, I'm more excited about other things.
Yeah.
So why not get rid of
right?
them and
Yeah.
reinvest that money and stuff. I've sold some other things like bits, Warhammer kits that I've been sat on that I inherited from my old Box of Shame from when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
And because that is not money I necessarily planned to have, I feel guiltless in reinvesting it in Warhammer projects I actually want.
Yeah, sure.
So rather than, I would honestly think like every couple of months have like a critical look at your shame pile, see what you could potentially divest yourself of and reinvest it in projects you actually want to do,
Yeah.
rather than seeing everything as a potential bottomless investment of hours waiting for you to get round to it.
Yeah, indeed.
Next question comes from Alistair, who writes, Dear Movies Mintley, what I must ask you now is a matter of darkest heresy. Have you ever thought about getting any non-Games Workshop miniatures, either just to build or paint or use as proxies? I'm aware that GW stores used to have policies against having models in your army from other manufacturers, so you may have no choice as you both play there frequently. I live in South Africa where we have no GW official stores, and I'm currently building a Beastman army using the excellent Foramaic Gabrax from Mias Miniatures. This is mostly due to the current GW offerings being very dated. While I do like the new Zangor, I've always preferred Undivided Anarchy from my Beastman. Thanks for your continually excellent pod, Alistair.
Mia's has some lovely models I'd love to paint up, particularly just kind of undead knights and stuff that look very Dark Souls, actually. They look like kind of suits of armor that are animated. Yeah. Very, very different to anything that GW do. Those are awesome models. Likewise, some of the monsters from, what was the problematic game?
Malifaux?
I think it's Malifaux. It's the one with,
no, Kingdom Death is the one you're thinking of.
Kingdom Death.
Kingdom Death is the Dark Souls one with the amazing monsters and the inexplicably pin up everything else.
Yes, yeah. So the monsters in that, especially the night enemies, are amazing models. I think, I'd love to see GW do some proper knights. You know what I mean? Like Chaos Knights, or just, that kind of awesome armored warrior. Some of the closest they've done was one of the heroes for Nurgle that they released, which was just like a kind of suit of armor with a big shield, and it's fairly conventional, but it looked really, really cool. And there's no kind of cool knight army that I feel like you can get in Age of Sigmar at the moment. So I'd go to other model ranges for that stuff.
I think for me, a big part of it is the quality of the miniatures. Obviously I completely get it if you're in a place where it's not easy to get access to GW stuff.
Oh yeah, sure.
But like, it happens to be that there's an alignment between the stuff I'm interested in and the stuff GW is currently making. And GW models tend to just be of a higher quality.
They are very good. Yeah.
Like, that's a big part of it. I don't really want to start working with metal models. That limits things. Trying to avoid resin where I can. So.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Like, a lot of the better GW alternatives tend to be resin.
Yeah.
And resin's like something I'm like quite tricky to work with.
And also, like, a big part of my hobby is currently involved in like GW store stuff.
Yeah.
And potential for going for Warhammer World and things.
You're right. So you've got to take
that. I kind of appreciate that means that I'm kind of trapped in GW's ecosystem by GW's own rules. It just happens to be a kind of happy form of imprisonment at the moment because the models are so good that I don't really feel the need to go outside it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I totally get it why you would. I think for me, it's not a concern. Like, none of my current shame pile is made up of it. I can't imagine it anytime soon.
Yeah.
But I totally get it if that's what people...
I considered proxying the War Master army that I ended up making out foam board. And there are lots of very good, well, not amazing, but I mean, there are lots of people producing 10mm scale models, that could easily be proxied in for War Master stuff.
Yeah, that'd be great, actually. I think, for something like that. But like, so much of my hobby stuff at the moment is towards kind of like main game army stuff.
Yeah, sure.
Like, for main game army stuff, no.
Yeah.
For interesting side projects, yes, basically.
On our Discord channel, I forget who, sorry, but someone's been painting up some cool spaceships for, is it Drop Zone? I can't remember the name.
Oh, it's Drop Fleet Commander.
Drop Fleet Commander, that's it.
And I think it's Jams who's doing that.
Yeah, those are really awesome, really cool ship designs and lovely paint jobs on those. And it really gave me the itch to play some Battlefleet Gothic. So I was on eBay just like, how much would an Imperial fleet cost? So that's, maybe I could proxy a Battlefleet Gothic.
Yeah. More foam.
More foam, yeah. Foam board ships. Good.
Next question comes from John, who writes, Dear Chris Nefex and Tomagant, looking at the new Deepkin models, I wonder how Zinch feels about the magic user with the octopus model. Magic and tentacles is kind of its thing, but it's one of its things.
I love the idea that a god would get jealous of it.
Exactly. One question. Given the amazing model ranges still coming out for both AOS and 40k, if you were starting now with a blank slate, would you still be Stormcast/Sylvaneth and Tzeentch/Chaos? Or would either of you have started with something different? Is the rate of good new stuff a pain with limited time and budget? Or do you revel in the excitement it can bring to the game? Finally, will Chris now be swayed from indecision on a 40k force by new knights? Regards, John.
That is a good one. There's the alternative universe where I collected Sylvaneth instead of Stormcast. I think.
Yeah.
Because that's probably the range that kind of most appeals to me, just because my roots in Wood Elf, and having Wood Elves as a youngster, that's definitely, I love to see that influence carry over. In terms of new releases, I love all the new releases. Brilliant. Even if I don't paint or collect them, I just love seeing them out there. I love playing against them. I love seeing what GW's designers are coming up with.
Yeah, I think we covered earlier that, like, why we're not necessarily drawn to new releases. If I was to start again, I don't know, because I really do love the Tzeentch stuff. I think weirdly, because I was drawn into it by Silver Tower, like, if I'd gone into it not knowing how much it was hard mode, I might choose something else. I'm very drawn to armies that have battle line troops you can get to a good standard quickly, and heroes where you can invest a lot of extra effort to make them look good.
Yeah.
I feel like Tzeentch doesn't strike that balance particularly well.
I think Ideneth do.
Ideneth probably do.
Yeah, by the looks of it.
I don't know what I would pick though. I think hypotheticals would be something like Caradron, where the battle line can be done nicely pretty quick. But the vehicles and the heroes offer an opportunity to do really interesting stuff.
And they look amazing as well. Going to Warhammer World was the first time I saw the big ships, like, in person. You don't see them on the tabletop that often. Really, really cool.
Other examples of that, I think, include Seraphim, Lizardmen. Great monsters and heroes.
Yeah.
But pretty easy battle line.
Yeah.
But very, like, Khorne, maybe, although I think Khorne's quite tricky. We'll come up with a way of doing it, but, like, but yeah, I'm happy with where I've ended up. As for 40k, so new knights, no, not yet. Although I have actually settled on a core 40k force. I'm just going to keep it a secret.
No. Ooh. Well, for a future podcast.
Yeah, for a future podcast.
Excellent.
Our next question comes from Mike, who writes, "Hi to Empire and Chris Battlesuit." Really fucking nailing the name puns.
That's very, very good.
It's very good.
I liked being a Tomagant.
Yeah.
I am many.
Crucifix.
I'm hungry and many.
With releases like Shadespire, Skirmish, Kill Team, and various board games, GW seem to want to occupy every gaming niche within their worlds. But what game is still missing? Is it a roller derby game? Perhaps a dexterity game, ever so slightly gently flicking your beautifully painted miniatures across the table? Presumably like Subbuteo.
Yeah. So is this like every genre of tabletop
Yeah, pretty much.
I suppose.
So there is a pen and paper RPG coming, the Wrath and Glory system, which I'm quite looking forward to.
There's a Age of Sigmar card game coming as well.
I think arguably Shadespire's got the kind of small model count super tight competitive thing tied up.
Mm-hmm. But they don't have an equivalent of the old board game Frustration, where you click in a little dome, and then, I mean, you could GW it up, you could put some, little nurglings in there, and you bop them, and then they flip around.
I want, Exterminatus Kaplunk.
Exactly.
where you start with a normal civilization, and every tenet of the Imperial Creed you remove draws you closer to the marble reaching Exterminatus.
Oh, nice. You could do, Primarch Buckaroo, just taking bits out of Raboot Guilliman until he notices and,
Yeah, Apothecary, like Belisarius calls Operation.
Yeah. Forging a Primaris Space Marine, try not to touch the sides.
Or else it goes beep.
So no, there are loads of niches, obviously, like every like 1980s, 70s board game, should be remade in GW's universe.
It should do. But yeah, actually I think in terms, like, it's hard to imagine them really missing they got a co-op game because it's Silver Tower. There's, I think, a 40k dungeon crawler. Like Silver Tower. Would be cool.
That could be cool.
But it would just be a 40k skin over Silver Tower, so it's not really filling a niche that isn't really filled.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, was Inquisitor kind of that? back
guess-
in the day.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's out of print, so yeah. I can't think of anything they haven't hit, which is a testament to their determination.
Yeah, something like equivalent to the Battlestar Galactica board game where one of you's a heretic.
Oh yeah.
That'd be good.
Oh, that's a good idea. That'd be a good Horus Heresy game, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
No.
Next question comes from Theo, who writes, Afternoon, fellows. My bid for the hotly contested hypothetical Primark question this month. In a world where the next season of Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares will focus exclusively on Bar's restaurant owned and operated by the Primarks, for each Primark, what kind of restaurant/bar do they run? What is the main thing going wrong, and why is their business failing?
Oh my goodness. High concept, I like it.
For example, he writes, Fulgrim would likely operate a hip New York venue focused on reaching the pinnacle of hawk cuisine. Think, a single asparagus on a plate with a dash of gooseberry yew. Fruity semicolon, but his kitchen, while ordered to perfection, can only produce one dish every 45 minutes. It's time for Gordon to offer some shouty home truths. Or Angron, as an obese man from the deep south operating a barbecue rib house at the side of a freeway. However, for some reason, he just cannot hold onto his staff, and Gordon has to step in with some appropriate swear words. Unfortunately, Angron dies of a massive heart attack halfway through the episode. Yours miniaturely, Theo. We can't go through every Primark,
No,
but we can think of some.
might be something that stand out, though. I've been obsessed with the program Deep Fried Masters recently.
We all have.
It's spread like wildfire through our friend group, which is like a 2013 discontinued series.
Yeah.
Incredibly low
It's on
budget.
Netflix.
People deep fry basically anything. And then three judges who have deep fried many things in their lives. The Primarchs of deep frying.
Yeah.
Then
Keen to remind you as well.
over and over again. If you ever meet someone who says, "Oh, my reputation precedes me," and they're saying that about themselves, that's definitely the point where they've gone off the edge and need to be retrieved. So Deep Fried Masters, I feel like there must be Primarchs who would slot into, who would take food to the midway. The fabled midway.
I think there's a few like obvious examples. I think you're right. There's a middle ground, not that ambitious field here.
That's right.
Where you get like Lemon Russ versus Robert Gilliman.
Yes.
Like you get Russ's kind of Viking grill house where everything's a little bit flavorless. Like the theme's a bit obvious and it doesn't really necessarily, you know what I mean? You get like you're told it's like a mead battered bun or something.
Right.
But it's not really.
It's, rebooted Gulliman, obviously he would produce
Classics.
but nutritionally exact. So it's going to be the right number of vitamins. The Codex decreed.
Compliant. RDA.
5 a day, fruit and veg, meat and potatoes. Boring but good for you.
Yeah.
But not
he
joyful.
constantly has staff that are too ambitious. And he's having
That's
to.
right, yeah. And he has to, gently fire them.
Whereas, maybe Ross is too in love with the theme and can never think outside of the theme. The theme is wolves.
Who's doing the kind of, the fat duck equivalent? Who's doing, Belisarius Call, I suppose, would be opening a restaurant and just serving you bits of marine. And
I think,
and the problem with that is you're serving bits of marine, and Gordon Ramsay would shout at him about that.
yeah, I think there's some I think maybe the Lion, like the Dark Angels are running like a pop-up that you have to book months in advance and you get there and it's not even on.
It's just
Like,
the Rock Cafe.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. So Fulgrim is a good one because Fulgrim is like the most ostentatious, right? He's the most kind of showy. He's the guy he's the Al Bulli, isn't he? Like that's the restaurant he would do. It's like, oh, we've served you some salt on a sheet of ice, and that's apparently food now. That would be their thing, just flamboyant
Until it gets too much.
flabbergasted, but always too much, right? Always too much, and just very Emperor's New Clothes stuff. Critics inflate it beyond its worth, and Ramsay just comes in and has to give them a sense of perspective.
Yeah. I think Vulcan would be like a flame grill barbecue place.
Oh yeah.
Where like it's actually a bit shit. Like the trappings make you feel like you're getting good barbecue, but actually everything's really overdone. It's been flame grilled for too long.
Too much
if
fire.
anything. And really the entire restaurant crests on a kind of positive rapport built with its regular clientele. Rather than the actual quality of the food.
Fantastic PR outreach.
Yeah. Someone needs to step in and actually do like fucking Gilliman's Grillerman is doing.
Ramsay needs to teach them
He's doing better barbecue.
medium rare means.
Yeah.
It's his role.
Like, the Imperial Fists, Rogel Dawn, and his Rogel Josh.
Yeah. Nice.
It's very too spicy. It is a trip inside the pain glove.
It is. Oh man. Your tongue is never recovering.
Yeah, it's both a pain glove and the pain reverse when it comes out the other end.
And Ramses comes in, he's like, just put some sour cream on it.
Yeah, just offer people a mild option.
Right.
And they're like, no.
Never.
Exactly.
It's communicating.
This is not the only bright yellow thing in this establishment. Yeah. I don't have a Magnus answer for this, because kind of like...
It wouldn't be food, it would just be like a kind of LSD horror show, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you can't feed people a vapor. And then this fucking dinner theatre thing you've got going is going on too long. It's taking up too much of the experience.
Yeah.
You can't do an hour and a half pageant for every dish that's brought out.
Not sure that Ramsay would recognise it as food. He'd be like, his advice would be, you should make some actual food.
Yes, good. I think we've just about gotten to the bottom of...
Yeah, we've gotten to the bottom of that, and I will go to none of those restaurants.
Just don't.
Just don't go.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
Yes, and then there's, I don't know, who just runs a Beefeater? Which of the Primarchs just fucking...
Or just as a chain restaurant.
Yeah, exactly.
That's someone just boring a loyal, I suppose, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Which would be used to be Gulliman, but not anymore. He's fallen out with the Emperor, hasn't he, a little bit? There aren't many that just do as they're told. I wonder what, I mean, if you want some like really great French cooking where the meat is almost always just served blue.
It's sanguineous.
Start to finish.
Yeah.
And Ramsay goes in and you can't criticise that.
No,
It's
you
just
can't.
really
He's
good.
just a beautiful angel
It's just
boy. It's a shame
beautiful
he's
angel.
died.
Cooks beautiful blue steaks for you.
So our final question is not actually a question, but just a little link and a recommendation. So Luke, who is a member of our Discord community, wrote an article a while ago about how wargaming and hobby has been beneficial to his mental health, and he ended up doing a interview, I think, with the Fjordhammer podcast about exactly this subject. Cool. So he wrote in to send us the link to that, and I figured that we would put it in the show notes. So it's not so much not so much a question, so much as a little plug. So check on the link at crankcrowbar.com for the show notes for this episode, where you'll find a link to Luke's chat about this subject. But it's definitely something that I feel is resonant, because I know that hobby, particularly painting particularly, has been a great kind of outlet for me over the last couple of years. So indeed. I would I would endorse any kind of discussion on that subject. So yeah, thanks for doing that, Luke, and B, sending the link in.
Thanks for linking.
And that is all of the massive Miniatures Monthly.
It's been a lot to catch up on.
Yeah,
but I hope we've done an alright job.
I think so. That we have time for. If you'd like to send us a question for a future episode, you can email us at miniatures@crateandcrowbar.com. You can also tweet us and find some pictures and jokes and dumb stuff on Twitter at Miniatures Monthly.
Mm-hmm.
You can also, what should we say? Oh, you find on YouTube. That's a part of this podcast I have to say.
Oh, yes.
At youtube.com/Crate and Crowbar. We find all the Crate and Crowbar stuff, but you also find the YouTube versions of these podcasts. Obviously, this podcast is supported by the Crate and Crowbar Patreon. You find out details of that at patreon.com/Crate and Crowbar. The support for our regular PC games podcast helps us do all these other side projects. And so thank you very much to all of our backers. And you find out more information there. Finally, I guess if you wanted to follow us or our miniatures escapades individually, Tom, how would people find you?
I'm best found on Instagram, and my username is Ludo Paints Minis, Ludo.
As indeed he does.
I do.
And my minis Instagram is at Exit Warp, which is EXITWARP.
Thanks for listening, everyone.